Thank you, thank you, thank you. Hey guys, Sly here, and welcome back to another episode of the Caspian Game Awards. So, obviously, we've talked about the entirety of the 2010s, and of course the 2020s so far, except for the year 2010 proper. So, it's been a long journey so far. We've been taking this just entire half a year to essentially get to this point. And, well, we're not even halfway done with all the years that we're going to be talking about. So, like, that's fine. Because, like, admittedly, we're starting to actually get to the years that are going to start cooking so much. Because, let's just say I've got a lot of positive things to talk about 2010. So, obviously, I'm streaming this a day later than what I was supposed to do. I do apologize for that. I just wanted to make sure that I did my thorough research on exactly what I'll be talking about for 2010, because, well, this year was surprisingly a really good year as far as the research. So, of course, before we get into that, if you guys enjoy all the content that you get and all the stuff that I've been making, of course, hit that follow button down below and turn the bell icon. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure that subscribe button and do the same thing with the bell. It helps me on the long run. And, well, big announcement before we actually get into this. I will admit, I don't know how much often I'm going to be doing a lot of live streams because, I mean, I've mentioned this plenty of times in years past. It gets really hot in my room. Like, so hot that, like, I actually have to, like, sleep outside in, like, the living room. And like do stuff out there. That's how hot it gets here in where I'm living, and we've tried everything. We add blackout curtains, we tried to check the air vent, and even despite all of that, none of that shit works. The only thing that works is turning on the AC, but it gets really expensive whenever we try doing that, which that gets into a whole rant about how much I fucking hate our current, the way in which like America operates its homing system, but that's a whole other conversation I really don't want to have today. Point is that, like, if I'm gone for a few, for a bit, like for a while, please be patient with me, because unfortunately it just gets way too hot for me to actually do anything in this room, because like there's only so much I can there's only just so much I can handle under like a massive heat wave. So I sincerely apologize to if like the next month I end up being a bit more inactive than I wish. It's mainly just for the sake of my health. So but of course, with that announcement out of the way, let's get into 2010. So 2010, that was a long ass time ago now. Jesus. So, but as far as like, the Game Awards are concerned, yeah, we're starting to get into some of the cringier years. If it wasn't already cringy enough, obviously we don't talk about the Game Awards itself directly. For those who are new to the series, basically, I pretty much assess a lot of the awards that the Game Awards of years past have given out. And I pretty much, change it into my own nominees as well as my own winners. I even make it to where I have more consistent categories, so not like weird one-off categories that like they have, like for example, or even just straight up just dumb categories like best performance by a human male. It's like, do you have to be very specific about that? Again, we're talking about the Spike video game awards here. This is not the normal game awards that we're all so familiar with nowadays. Trust me, it was pretty cringe back in the day. And unfortunately, as we go along, it'll only get worse. Trust me, it gets pretty bad as far as like, the actual game awards. That being said, as far as talking about the games themselves, this might actually surprise a lot of people. But it may not surprise anyone at all for those who've been watching the streams for years now. This might just straight up be the best year we've talked about thus far. And I'm telling you that with a dead, like, just straight with a dead face, right? Or dead straight in the eyes. Because, like, 2010, as far as, like, game releases are concerned, was a very, very, very big year. Like, holy shit. Like, there were so many games that came out in this year alone. And, frankly, if I'm going to be honest, there's probably been more games that, like, came out this year that not only do I go shit about, but I do genuinely think are really good than, like, any of the other years that we talked about. A close follow-up years, I would definitely say, would be 2013, 2016, 2019, 2020, and, like, 2023, I would say, as far as, like, you know, years we've talked about thus far. But, like, they have not had the same numbers as 2010 did. So, as far as, like, you know, top years for gaming, honestly, 2010 is up there. Like, I was surprised with the amount of releases that came out here. That's not to say that this year was particularly, like, you know, completely amazing all around the board. Unfortunately, there is one category that I did unfortunately have to remove, but in favor of that, I actually ended up adding another category, but we'll get into that a little bit. But suffice to say, as far as, like, shooters, as far as multiplayer games, as far as the strategy genre was doing pretty good. The sports racing category as well. And even the action adventure category. This was one of the best years for action adventure games, just straight up. Like, so much so that, like, I know for a fact that, like, I'd be missing a lot of games. Hell, I'm even probably going to be missing a lot of games, even after we talk about the guilty pleasures. But suffice to say, this was a really damn good year. With, I'd say, only, like, maybe the RPG category being kind of stiffy. But rest assured, there were some pretty good RPGs that did come out in 2010. So I think overall, it balances out a lot. But of course, let's talk about the categories. So, like I said, pretty much every single category that we've had thus far is pretty much applicable here, except for the indie category. But again, as we've established, I feel, and also the remaster remake, those are going to be more reserved for pretty much 2015 onwards. So once I do 2024 at the end of the year, and hint, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, those categories will return. Though I will say the only disappointing thing about this is that, like, there weren't really a lot of games that were by new studios that came out in 2010. I tried doing my research. I tried looking for deep cuts, indie games, and I really only found, like, maybe 2 games, and one of them technically isn't really, like, you know, the studio's first game, so, like, I didn't want to risk it. However, because we're actually getting closer into the 2000s, and, you know, we're getting further and further away from the present day, I decided to actually add in a new category. So, for all of those people who are huge fans of, like, you know, old school, like, you know, gaming, I have decided to add the category of 2D and 3D platformers. Thank you. I know, you guys are excited about that. So, we're adding a platformer genre category here, because, well, A, holy shit, there were a lot of platformers, but also B, if I didn't add this category, I'd be snubbing way too many games. Like, this year, even as late as 2010, the platformer genre was kicking a lot of ass. Because, suffice to say, the 2010s, and even the 2020 so far, platformers have basically just been dead. This is the first year I feel more comfortable actually having that as a category. Because I was teetering on it whenever I first started doing this podcast, but I feel like this is the first year I can fully commit to it. So, but yeah, of course, we'll get into the platformer category. But of course, before we get into that, let's go over a few new rules, or the rules in general. So, of course, for those who have been watching us, you guys already know, we must, rule number 1, it has to be a game released within that entire frame of a year. So no weird cutoff points, and also no weird North American only releases. We're counting European and Japanese releases as well. So there you go. Rule number 2, granted, this is becoming a bit of a less and less of an issue. As a matter of fact, I think probably in the next stream for 2009, I'll remove this as sort of like a caveat. But a game must have had a decent to good launch. Games fixed after the fact will only apply by case scenario. So no broken games. Thankfully, we're getting away from the era of broken launches, so that's perfectly fine with me. No early access games, so no games in beta, alpha, or pre-alpha. But then I also added this new rule, and this has been kind of a rule that has been a hidden rule, but I feel like I need to exemplify, especially for this year. DLC and expansions, since we have those as a category, we are only going to allow DLC expansions only from games that were not released in the year in which we're ranking. Because, it wouldn't be fair for a lot of the DLC from older games to be nominated. I guess that's the main reason, because games get DLC all the time, or expansions, and let's just say there'd be way too many snubs if we didn't have that as a category. If we allowed pretty much a bunch of games to have who had DLCs in this year to have that, but whatever. Game of the year, of course, it needs to be a game that is generally liked, generally accepted by people. It has to be a completely new game, so no remakes or remasters are allowed. And of course, only games that I'm interested in will be chosen. Art style, aesthetics, and biases from game series personally matter to me. However, that being said, there's going to be one exception to that rule that I will be applying. And you guys will be shocked, because I've given this franchise a lot of fucking criticism, but we'll get to it when we get to it. But I feel like that is pretty much all I got to say as far as the rules. And of course, keep in mind, this is my personal opinion. If you disagree with me, that's completely fine. And besides, this is definitely a year that I would definitely be open to hearing a lot of people's sort of takes about what they consider to be the best game for each category. Because again, 2010 had so many damn games that were pretty good or even just straight up amazing that I know I would be missing something. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm open to hearing what everyone else has to say. But in any event, let's begin with the first category of the action adventure genre. As you can see, no platformers, but we're still going to include horror games in here because, I'm not the biggest fan of horror games as a whole, and also just, I wouldn't really say that there's too many good horror releases each year, so obviously we put them in here. But like I said, action adventure games really were kicking ass in 2010. This was definitely, if you were a huge, especially hack and slash games, if you were a massive fan of hack and slash games, this was your year. 2010 had so many good examples of it. So did the Game Awards at least recognize that? Because let's just say that they were more focused on, objectifying women than they were actually giving out good, reviews of games. So, casual sexism always, overtakes, stupid Spike Game Awards. But I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. Let's see how well they did with the action adventure category. they did pretty good. Well, okay. They did good if this was like a normal, like, stream of ours. But as far as like what they chose, these are all pretty fair pickings. Let's start off with God of War 3. Obviously, this game was the PS3 introduction for God of War because the first two games were originally PS2 only. But yeah, no, as far as like the old school God of War games, at least as far as I'm concerned, I heard this is definitely the best one. And fair enough, this was sort of the conclusion of the main storyline for Kratos before eventually we would see him with his storyline in the newer games. And as far as like the old school way in which God of War was, this is definitely a good picking here. A lot less jank and more freedom of movement. And that's pretty fun to deal with. And again, as far as hack and slash games are concerned, you can definitely make a good case that this is probably the best of that era. That's not to disrespect any other hack and slash from that time period, but this was a pretty big deal when it came out in 2010. That being said, what also was a pretty big deal when it came out in 2010, Red Dead Redemption. Yes, this was the year of Red Dead's sort of rise to prominence, as you say. Because keep in mind, there was Red Dead Revolver back in 2004, but that game never really got a lot of like mainstream coverage, mostly because it was okay. But this game really did redefine that entire like series and proved that you can have a really good Wild West game in the modern age. Well, modern at the time. Obviously, this isn't really the modern age anymore, but it showed that the genre still had a place. And yeah, no, this game can be a lot of fun just simply exploring and doing a bunch of like side quests. Oh, even just going out to the wilderness of the US-Mexico border. It's so like intriguing to go through. And so yeah, easily I do respect it. I know it can technically be played as a shooter, so like you can make an argument that it could also be in the shooter category, but if you're gonna count as an action adventure, fair. And then the last game that I would definitely say deserves to be in this category, at least, Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. You guys know me, I am someone who does respect the Assassin's Creed franchise, even if some of the latter games did end up becoming a bit stale. I do personally consider Brotherhood to be one of the better games in the entire series. Hell, this was actually my favorite game for a while. So, yeah, no, as far as I'm concerned, and especially as a continuation to Ezio's story, yeah, no, this game deserves to be on here. And of course, that leads us into Super Mario Galaxy 2, which this game, obviously, we have the platformer category, so you can probably already tell where this is going to go. But, like, also keep in mind that this game came out in, like, the latter half of the Wii's life cycle. Because, obviously, as you guys know, the Wii sold like hotcakes whenever it first came out. It was the most successful out of the three consoles, like of the 7th gen era, at least sales numbers wise. But I do feel like that a lot of people always talk about the first half, like the early half of the Wii's life cycle, way more fondly than the latter half. Not to say that Super Mario Galaxy 2 is a bad game, because it's not. It's actually a pretty worthy sequel to Super Mario Galaxy. I guess that's just kind of what I'm trying to say, though, is that, like, this game's kind of in an awkward position as far as, like, when it came out. But as far as this game is concerned, I can see, like, since they didn't have a platformer category, I can see why they ended up choosing it here. But, of course, Assassin's Creed Brotherhood actually was the one that ended up winning, which Again, fair pickings. Most people would prefer Red Dead Redemption, but I'm not going to argue. But let's improve this a little bit, because let us also remind ourselves that this was the year that Alan Wake and Amnesia: The Dark Descent, two iconic horror games, were brought into the scene. So Alan Wake was originally, I think, an Xbox exclusive, right? Or Xbox 360 exclusive back in 2010. And they got like all the, re-releases on PC and I think on other consoles. So, but yeah, no, this game obviously was Remedy Entertainment's next big project after they were, kind of loosely done with Max Payne. Obviously, they would release Max Payne 3, but this was their next big project. And what a project it was. Funny enough, this game was actually a bit of a sleeper hit. Like, it took a while until, like, people learned about the game and started playing it themselves. But once people did, oh boy, did it get people hooked. Because of just, obviously it's heavily inspired by, stuff like X-Files, or even stuff like the Twilight Zone. Hell, the recent Alan Wake 2 DLC is hella inspired by the Twilight Zone. But like, as far as, stuff like that, and as far as like a mainstream, I mean, I call it a horror game. It's not really like survival horror. It's more just action horror. I still think it's a pretty cool game. Like, it's a bit on the creepier side. Yeah, very Twin Peaks, as you can probably, tell by that cover. But yeah, like, as far as a mainstream budgeted, like, action horror game's concerned, yeah, no, it can be pretty fun. But if you want true horror, you can always go to Amnesia: The Dark Descent. This game was the game that put Frictional on the map. Sure, they made the Penumbra games beforehand, but they were honestly relatively obscure. And if I'm going to be honest, if I did actually have a game by a new studio, this would easily be a contender for it. It's just, this was only one of 2 games that I could have found for that category. But make no mistake, there's a reason why Amnesia is still respected to this day. It's because it pretty much innovated on a lot of the design that horror games weren't particularly doing. It's basically an improved version of like the Penumbra games. And, well, set in a much better environment, if I'm going to be honest. And yeah, this game can be creepy as hell. So, as far as I'm concerned, this should have been a nominee for any category, because guess what? This didn't even get a single nomination in any category, like, at all at the Game Awards. Despite the fact that this was this was the most played game on YouTube back in 2010. So,
what a shame.
Yeah, absolute snub. This game deserves to get a lot of praise. And you know what I'm also going to throw in? And admittedly, this one's kind of a bit more of a left field choice, but it's one I do want to give a bit of a mention to. Lara Croft and the Guardian of Light. So this is a spin-off of the Tomb Raider games, as the name implies. But instead of it being a general action-adventure game, this is an isometric puzzle adventure. And yeah, no, it's a lot of fun. It actually does surprise me that this game doesn't really get talked about all that much. Because, again, this game is definitely more puzzle-driven. And it's a cooperative experience, so you can pretty much play with a buddy. And let's just say that, like, in a pre-Portal 2 world, this honestly would have been a really good, alternative as far as, like, puzzle adventure games are concerned. There's some loose combat in it, but it's not the main focus. The focus is, of course, the adventure and the puzzle aspect. But it's definitely a game that is worth your attention if you want to get into more puzzle games. So to speak. So yeah, like as far as I'm concerned, this is a pretty good list of action adventure games. And keep in mind that there's even more. But of course, we'll talk about that later down the line. Let's get into what I'm going to choose as far as the winner for these games. So, of course, because obviously I got to have this. And let's announce the winner. So the award for the best action adventure game of 2010 goes to Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. The moment you guys heard me say that, like, this was my favorite Assassin's Creed game for a while, that should have probably, probably was a bit of a spoiler. But there's several reasons why I do think that this is probably the best as far as action adventures. So first of all, it obviously continued Ezio's storyline that was established with Assassin's Creed 2, as well as the human storyline with the with the Abstergo stuff. Honestly, I could give less of a fuck about that. What really matters is the actual, mainline story with Ezio. And yeah, no, it was definitely a good sort of part 2, as you will, to his storyline. And truth be told, like, you could make an argument that, like, if it was just, the previous game and Brotherhood, people wouldn't necessarily be upset. I would definitely still think that, I still personally think that Revelations is still an amazing game in its own right. But as far as, like, continuing that story, Brotherhood's pretty good in that regard. And also, this is the first game to solely focus on, like, one city. And while that may take away from the vastness of, like, the worlds that you're going into, compared to the previous games, I actually think it's to the game's benefit by focusing on one city. Yeah, because by focusing on one city, you add a lot more life and detail into it, and I think it really works to this game's benefit. Plus, there's tons of side activities, including a lot of the the tombs that you can go into. Also, I've noticed this is the first game where I noticed that there was a lot less janky parkour in this, because admittedly the first 2 games can still kind of have iffy control. I feel like they fixed a lot of those problems with, like, starting with this game. And this game also just has general better quality of life combat. Yeah, it's still very similar to the older games, but I do think that it's much more tuned out. So, but suffice to say, Brotherhood is a game that I would recommend you guys play. Like, it's really damn good. Oh, and also, I do like how you can actually hire other assassins to help you with a bunch of side quests and help you with, like, taking out targets. That is pretty cool. So, just something I wanted to throw out there. But suffice to say, so far, I do agree with the Game Awards, at least substantively with the choices. Not necessarily the show itself. But of course, let's continue, because I don't want to talk about that. Let's get into platformers. So this is the new category, the best platformer game. So obviously the definition of a platform game is pretty iffy, I would say, because I'm just gonna be frank, there are so many games that people call platformers but actually aren't. So my definition of a platformer is a game that you have to rely on, okay, this one's going to be hard to describe. Basically, it's a game in which where the sole purpose of the game with its levels is to get to point A to point B with, gamey, like, obstacles. I know that's a weird term to call something like that, but, like, if you see a platformer, you know what a platformer is essentially what I'm trying to say. It's something I would definitely say that, like, a good example of a platformer obviously would be games like, as far as 2D games are concerned, the Mario games, of course, Sonic. What's another good example? Mega Man. Stuff like that. And as far as 3D platformers, I would definitely say that Crash Bandicoot works out. Yeah, checks out. Psychonauts counts as well in that sort of department. I would also count the Spyro games. So, and then some of the Ratchet and Clank games. However, games that I do hear people call platformers but aren't, I would count games like Tomb Raider, Uncharted, Assassin's Creed, and controversially, Sly Cooper in the mix. It's an action-adventure series, people. It is not a platformer. By definition, it's not. Or at least 2, 3, and 4 aren't. 1, you can make a case. Not the other 3 games. But that's not here nor there. Point is that it's a bit of an iffy category. But I do think that the games that I did end up choosing, most people would agree are platformers. So that's not necessarily going to be a thing that I'm going to be worried about too much. But of course, let's get into what I ended up choosing. Because, well, let's just say 2010 was a pretty strong year for platformers. Because 2011 onwards, nosedive as far as popularity. This was the last year, I would say, where platformers were popular. But of course, it's going to be the first year we're going to be talking about with platformers, naturally. So, but of course, let's talk about the nominees. First off, we got Mega Man 10. So, people do kind of forget that Mega Man was gone for a while. Mega Man as a franchise was just kind of abandoned by Capcom for a good 5-6 years. Because the last game that I can at least think of was X8 in 2004. Yeah, that's about it. And then, it took them a while, but they eventually made Mega Man 8 in 2008, and then, or Mega Man 9, excuse me. Mega Man 8 was on PlayStation years before. Yeah, Mega Man 9, and then, well, in 2010, they made Mega Man 10. So, and, well, truth be told, Mega Man 10 is definitely an improvement upon what they were doing with Mega Man 9, and naturally, a lot of the other games that they released back in the late 90s to the mid 2000s, because that era was just not very good as far as Mega Man's concerned. A lot of people do kind of see that era not very fondly, outside of the Zero games, but whatever. But yeah, no, Mega Man 10, I would argue if it wasn't locked to consoles, I would highly recommend the game, because that's the one crutch, is that it is unfortunately stuck on console hardware right now. Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3. I'm looking at my consoles. It's stuck on that hardware. That's a problem. Thankfully, Capcom has been getting better at preserving a lot of their old games, so I would imagine that they will include Mega Man's 9 and 10 in some sort of compilation in the future. But that is a bit of a problem, especially since the 360 library is getting shut down later in next month. So that's all I gotta really hope for. But I would still recommend you guys check out Mega Man 10. And then, of course, we have Super Mario Galaxy 2, which, of course, makes sense why this is in the category. It's Super Mario Galaxy 2. Need I say more about that? Other than what I already said earlier. It, of course, deserves being here. But also what deserves being on here is Limbo, a game that I remember streaming 3 years ago. And yeah, no, this game is pretty creepy, but it's also pretty cool. And funny enough, this actually was the other game I was going to nominate for Best Game by a New Studio, but because of my stipulation that there has to be at least 4 games, there was just straight up not enough. Which is a damn shame. But as far as the studio's first project goes, because they also ended up making Inside, yeah, no, Limbo deserves to get a lot of praise. Even if it's not my favorite game, it's still like a really cool mix of both survival horror and platforming elements. And I guess you can also throw in like this being technically an art game. So I will give credit where credit is due. And then we've got Shantae, which, I mean, you guys already see I'm a little bit biased with this one. Though this one's kind of a weird game because, well, this was the first Shantae game in 8 years. Yeah, because back in 2002, they made the first Shantae game, but then they were originally going to release Risky Revolution back in 2005, but then Capcom didn't want to publish the games anymore, and then they had a lot of issues when it came to, finding a publisher, and then they had to cancel that game, which thankfully they're reviving at some point later this year. But, they basically Way Forward has been through the ringer when it comes to Shantae. They eventually finally released this game, and it's honestly a miracle that this game came out. And truth be told, it's still pretty good. Like, I would still recommend you guys check this out. It is admittedly one of the weaker entries in the Shantae series. Like, I would definitely say that Pirate's Curse and Half Genie Hero are overall better games. But that's no snub to Risky's Revenge. It is still a quality Shantae title that I would easily recommend to anyone who is into platformers and, Metroidvania style of games. Go check it out. And of course, speaking of, long-awaited sequels, Donkey Kong Country Returns. So, Donkey Kong is another franchise that has been through the ringer. A lot of these have been through the ringer, as you can probably tell. Because, well, Donkey Kong Country, at least the first 3 games, are highly regarded Super Nintendo games. Which, fair enough, because I'm not the biggest fan of Rare myself, but I will admit, I would probably say those are some of their best games. At least in my opinion. But then after they lost the license, Nintendo didn't really know what to do with the Donkey Kong name, and throughout the 2000s, it was kinda shaky. Until 2010 came out with this game. And people do consider this to be not only like a return to form, but honestly, in some ways, even superior to the original games. So, yeah, no, like... And again, this is another game that came out in the latter half of the Wii era. So, that's pretty telling of just how, people are very passionate about this game. So, yeah, no, like, fair. And you know what else is also another late Wii era game that I am also going to give credit where credit is due? And this might surprise you guys because, well, admittedly of just kind of my stance about modern Disney at least. Epic Mickey. There's a reason why this game recently just got itself a remake/remaster. Because this was a very weird direction that they took Mickey Mouse as a character. Which, there's been plenty of games that have come out with Mickey Mouse as, like, the main character for it. Admittedly, it's still a little bit of a weird concept for me, because, like, I associate Mickey Mouse way more with, like, animation than I do video games, especially since he's a character that is literally 96 years old as of the time of this recording. Like, he's been around for, like, almost an entire century, and, like, only about a third of that he's been in games. I don't know, that's kind of weird. But as far as, like, translating him into a 3D platformer, because I know there's some of the games from the 90s that people do like, but as far as, like, transitioning him into a more 3D action adventure platformer game, this is actually a pretty good way to do it. And this could have been one of the coolest, I don't want to say cool, but, like, one of, like, the most unique takes that, like, Disney could have done with their titular IP. It's just obviously didn't really work out because the sequel didn't really do too well, and well, you know how the story goes. But I would still recommend this game as far as like Disney IP games are concerned. There are very few Disney IP games that I do confidently will, like, you know, give credit where credit is due. And also, this game has a really cool art direction. It takes a lot of inspiration from like the theme parks, specifically Disneyland, with its locales, and yeah, it basically just kind of runs with it. So, as far as like, you know, a unique take on like that, you know, of, you know, Mickey, this is definitely one of them. It's definitely better than whatever cringy horror games that people are making OG Mickey Mouse with. Please, for the love of God, don't do that cringe. I swear to God. However, there can only be one winner. There's 6 choices, only one winner. But, of course, winners are here, as always. So let's get to the winner. So, the winner for the best platformer game is, of 2010 is Shantae Risky's Revenge. I know this is a biased pick. I know this is a biased pick. But it's my show, so I don't give a fuck. I would still argue that this game is still pretty good in its own regard. Again, you could argue that a Super Mario Galaxy 2 is probably better, but the fact that this game was a long-awaited sequel that took a long-ass time to actually get released really showcases just how dedicated WayForward is to this particular IP. And this game has a lot of improvements compared to the original, because the original was on Game Boy Color. There's only so much you can do. This game improved the camera as well as the level design, and made it more in line with more traditional Metroidvania games like Symphony in the Night. Obviously, it's not an RPG, but it carries a lot of that similar DNA. Admittedly, it is on the shorter side, but it uses that time in a fashion, a fashion manner, and it basically just kind of, you know, squeezes as much time as it possibly can to make a quality experience. And I do feel like this game, as far as the transforming abilities, as well as this game, you know, utilizing its magic abilities a bit better compared to the first game, I think it adds to the versatility of the combat in here, and I do think that it allows for an overall rounded, you know, experience. Is it the best platformer of all time, though? Obviously no, but it's still a game that I would recommend if you guys want to have at least a bit of a foot forward into the Shantae series, especially if you guys are iffy about the Game Boy Color game. Thankfully, that game just got like a ton of re-releases as of late. So it's not stuck to, like, you know, both the Game Boy Color and the 3DS, both dead platforms. Well, 3DS being more dead because, you know, online servers shut down, but, you know, you get the point. I would still recommend you guys check out Shantae. And again, I'm a little bit biased because, well, you see her. You see her in the background. You see her behind Patrick Stump back there. So, by the way, side tangent, I recently just got myself a Luna U2s. So, because I saw that they were selling those, and I was like, yeah, I want that. So, I'm getting another U2 of another character that means a lot to me at some point in the next few months. I pre-ordered it, but it will hopefully be here by September. So, but yeah, sorry about that side tangent. I just wanted to point that out. But you get the point. Even my bias aside, I still think this is a good game. So, game of the year. Well, not game of the year. Best platform game of the 2010. So, alright. Role-playing games. So, I already said that if I'm going to be honest, this is probably the weakest category for 2010. Not that like this game did, not like this year had, terrible all the around RPGs to the point where I just straight up could not find any. Obviously, I did find enough, but man, there's a reason why, Skyrim popped as big as it did back in 2011. It's because RPGs were just in a not very good spot in 2010. Like, yeah, again, there were a lot more action adventure games that were coming out as opposed to just straight up role playing games. And I think that has more to do with just the changing gaming trends at the time, as opposed to people being sick and tired of role playing games. But again, I just think it just made more sense at the time. That being said, there were still role playing games that were pretty big that year. But did the Game Awards capitalize on that? Well, in some ways, yes. In some ways, no. So, let's start off with the obvious ones here. Final Fantasy 13 should just straight up not be on here. Because, well, this game originally came out in 2009. Yes, I know it had a Xbox 360 release in like January of 2010, but that still should not count. But also, this was one of the Final Fantasy games I do remember playing, because again, I played Final Fantasies 1, 2, 4, 6 now, 7, 8, 9, 12, and then 13. This is one of the worst ones in that entire thing that I played. This is just straight up a pretty bad game. There's a reason why this game was very infamous when it came out, because of its weak-ass writing, its so dumbed down like gameplay to the point where it was basically just, it basically was just resulting in button mashing. Long-winded segments that made no goddamn sense. And just frankly, just overall really bad art direction. Like, I have no idea what the hell they were thinking when they were working on this game, as far as its visual department, because this game is very confused on what it was trying to be. And, well, yeah, no, it just shouldn't be on here. Which, yes, that does mean technically this is the first game from the 2000s that we're talking about, but there's better games from 2009, people. Come on. So, yeah, no, big L on this one. Also, another big L, Fable 3. A game which, frankly, I'm not really the biggest Fable fan. Not because of its fantasy setting, because I love fantasy. You guys know how much I fucking love, high fantasy games. I love Lord of the Rings. I really like the Elder Scrolls. Warhammer Fantasy is my fucking go-to as far as, lore for Warhammer. Dragon Age I'm interested in, which, hint, hint, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, for a little bit later. And, obviously I played the Final Fantasy games. But, I don't know, Fable is just one of those series where it doesn't take itself super seriously, and it's more so to the detriment of just its game. Because, I don't know, it reminds me too much of Shrek, but, in a bad way, where it's just more of a parody, rather than, it taking itself seriously. I don't know, I've had complicated opinions when it comes to Fable. That being said, though, even if you disagree with me on how I feel about Fable, you cannot deny to me that this is a terrible game. Because I've heard nothing but people shitting on this game whenever, I was watching all the reviews, and just, looking up a lot of people's comments on Fable 3. A lot of people consider this to be not only the worst Fable game, but also just straight up a bad game. So to hell with this choice. Why the fuck it's here? I don't know. Probably because just how fucking dire this year was for just RPGs in general. That being said, we've got the other two choices here. Let's start off with the well, a bit of an obvious choice. If you guys have been around, you guys know my opinions about Fallout. It's no surprise that I'm someone who just doesn't really give a shit about Fallout all that much. That is not something that is new. If that is news to you, well, let me lay out to you. I don't like the 50s and 60s aesthetic that the entire series basically encompasses. I find it to be very uncomfortable, and just a lot of, and just this, I just have always found that era to be kind of a creepy era for, well, not just because of a lot of the picture characters, but also the, well, to put it bluntly, racism, homophobia, transphobia, ableism, and just straight up hatred for anyone who wasn't, like, you know, a quote-unquote true American. If you think that, like, you know, modern American politics is bad, go back to 1953. Holy shit. It would be it was a way worse time. So, to have a game that was basically just like an alternate future that's branched off from the 1950s just gives me instantly bad vibes. Just instantly. So, that's pretty bad optics, at least for me. That being said, though, this might sound weird coming from me, but Fallout New Vegas has been kind of the exception to that rule in, like, you know, at least in recent years. I know, all the Fallout fans are rejoicing that, like, I like a Fallout game. That doesn't mean that I'd say I like every single Fallout game. Fallouts 1 and 2 are pretty outdated as far as, like, you know, isometric RPGs are concerned. Nobody gives a shit about tactics in Brotherhood of Steel. Fallout 3 looks fucking terrible even to this day. Fallout 4 was pretty mixed by its community, and, well, you guys know what happened with Fallout 76. Do I need to remind you guys? So, and that's why I remember last year I just marked Fallout as just a bad franchise. Because even with Fallout New Vegas, there are still people out there who, maybe like the old school fans, who hate Fallout New Vegas, making this entire franchise very jaded when it comes to what people genuinely like. That being said, I am acknowledging that this is the game that gets the most love, and this is the game that I respect the most because, well, A, it's made by a lot of the original developers who worked on the first two Fallout games, so this is more in line, at least tonally, to those games. But also this is made by Obsidian, which is a studio that I do have a lot of respect for because, well, they made a bunch of their own RPGs. And so, as far as I'm concerned, I'm willing to give this game a pass, but barely. But then we have Mass Effect 2, just to kind of, you know, transition very much into this, because, you know, I don't think I need to repeat myself about Fallout. Let's move on to, Mass Effect 2. That's the final game on, well, what they nominated. Yeah, I mean, if I were to choose any game from this would probably be my choice. I mean, it's Mass Effect 2. It's, at least from what I can tell, a lot of people's favorite game in the series. You know, it improved the shooting mechanics. It has a lot better branching dialogue paths. It improved on a lot of the janky issues that the first game had. It was just an overall better game. And, well, it should not surprise you that it ended up winning this particular category. But let's see what I ended up choosing anyways. So I chose Mass Effect 2, begrudgingly as well, I ended up deciding to choose Fallout New Vegas as one of our choices here. But there's only one reason why I'm doing that. It's not because I like the entirety of the game. but it's because of okay. I gotta tell a story. Okay, so around this time last year, like early July 2023, I remember I was playing like basically for context, Goldie fucking loves Fallout. He talks about Fallout to me all the fucking time, even though he knows I don't give a shit about it. But I'm not shitting on him. I'm just saying he was playing Fallout New Vegas because he's much more of a Fallout 4 fan, and so he wanted to try out New Vegas. And I remember back in January of like last year, he was getting to the point where he got up to Benny, who's like the main antagonist of the game, or at least one of the main antagonists. And he was basically trying to play the game very passively or whatever. And he pretty much waited, like he got up, talked to Benny, and Benny basically made a deal where, like, he pretty much talked to Benny where he made a deal where he's like, wait in my room for, like, a little while and I'll be in there, whatever, right? And, so Goldie waited in there, and after, like, 4 in-game hours, Benny basically, instead of being there personally, he sent in a bunch of goons. And I told Goldie, like, dude, don't fucking fall for it. He's just gonna fucking, betray you. And he's like, nah, I'm gonna wait. Turns out I was right. Goldie was wrong. And so because of that, I ended up just buying Fallout New Vegas on Steam. And, like, I got up to level 9 in the game. Basically up to the point where, like, you do meet Benny. And keep in mind that, like, I was stockpiling, like, a bunch of, like, money, or, like, bottlenecks, or, yeah, whatever the fuck the currency in Fallout is. I basically gathered a bunch of that, and, like, I bought, like, the best gear I could buy from, like, one of the vendors. And, like, and keep in mind, I bought a grenade launcher. And, like, I barged into, like, where you meet him in, like, the casino. And, like, instantly I pulled out my weapon and I blew off his leg. That's not the best part, though, by the way. I was able to wipe out everyone. Keep in mind, I was level 8 and 9 during this entire thing. And, I took out casino security with ease. It was actually shocking that I was able to do that. But after I blew off Benny's legs, I went out of the casino, and then, like, I think it was, like, one of the robot guards or whatever. Like, he was like, oh, Mr. House wants to talk to you. And so, you know what I ended up doing? I ended up just straight up going into the tower where Mr. House is, where you see in the background in that picture. Basically, the stratosphere in Vegas. And basically what I did is I took a lot of, like, the damage boosting and, like, the hyper sense boosting shit. I just rampaged the entire, like, tower. And keep in mind, Mr. House never directly talked to me in the game. He doesn't know who the fuck I am. And once I defeated all of his guards, I went into his chamber, and the moment that and the moment that I saw I said, I just blew his heads off, and I just I just fucking shot him in the head and with no questions. I was doing all of this in the same call that Goldie was in, and also Big Joseph. We were all in the same call, and they both were fucking stunned. So yeah, suffice to say, I only bought the game just so that I can kill Benny. And so I could just kill Mr. House for Goldie, because he refused to fucking kill them. But I'm not someone who's willing to give in into any bullshit. I don't fucking... And also, I don't want to fucking hear it from any Fallout nerds being like, oh, you're not supposed to play the game like that. Okay, but the game allows me to do it, so I'm gonna fucking do it. And again, the best part... Here's the best part. I was only level 9 in the entire fucking thing.
That was his mistake.
Oh yeah, also, the day after I went over to the fucking Caesar's Legion and I got like a laser weapon and I disintegrated Caesar. Okay, admittedly, that is partially why I'm giving this game credit. Is because the reason why I give a lot of credit to Fallout New Vegas is because it is one of the few sandbox role-playing games that, like, exists. The fact that you can actually just straight up... Again, I know you're not supposed to do that, but the fact that you can... The fact that you can just pretty much go into the game and do whatever the fuck you want, while still having the context of a story, that's pretty awesome. I know my cat's yelling. He's just wanting attention. Don't worry. He does that all the time. But anyways, the fact that you can do all of that does showcase that there is a good game. I just don't like the setting. That's the fucking problem. Because again, as I mentioned at the beginning of the stream, I'm someone who gives a shit about aesthetics, and if I don't like the aesthetics of a game, I'm not gonna give a shit, because I just don't like the visual style, and I don't like the setting or like the motif that they're going for. That's the unfortunate sin with Fallout New Vegas. If it was literally anything else, I would be fine with it, but because it's a game that takes inspiration from the 1950s and 60s, I just can... Or, like, let me rephrase that. It takes inspiration from 1950s and 60s Americana. That's my problem with the game. I mean, for fuck's sake, there's an entire fucking club of people who fucking, you know, worship fucking Elvis Presley, which is the cringiest thing, especially since he's a goddamn pedophile. But whatever, you get the point. Like, I can't. Here's my hot take. If the game itself was... If the game like this was more... If the game had the aesthetics of Starfield, I'd be fine with it. Like... You guys can boo with me all you fucking want, but I don't give a shit. I don't like this setting. So... But whatever. Enough Fallout New Vegas talk. That's probably the most I've talked about Fallout in any of these goddamn streams. But whatever. It's a good game, I recognize. I just wish it had a different setting. That's all I'm going to say about that. But anyways, let's talk about the other games. Xenoblade Chronicles and Golden Sun Dark Dawn. Xenoblade Chronicles, yes, is a game that came out in 2010 in Japan. I know some people are probably questioning, well, it came out in 2012 in America. We go by original releases. We don't go by North American releases. This game came out in Japan in 2010. Therefore, it is a 2010 game. Which... There. Like, again, I'm not surprised that it wasn't originally on here, because, again, very North American-centric audiences when it came to the Spike Video Game Awards. That, and also, like, yeah, the early 2010s was still... Oh, shit. The 2010s was still kind of a weird, awkward... Was still in that weird, awkward era in which... Sometimes Japanese releases came out first before North American releases or European releases. I don't get it, but especially in the digital age, but whatever. Good game. Would highly recommend you guys check it out. So, and then last but not least, we got Golden Sun Dark Dawn. This was, I think, like the last Golden Sun game, if I'm not mistaken. So this was on the I think the DS, like the DSi, if I'm not mistaken. So, which Golden Sun, highly respectable RPG series that originally started on the Game Boy Advance, and of course, transitioned over to the DS. Fair. Decent, fantasy-like storyline. Go check it out if that interests you. But, of course, let's get into the winner for Best Role-Playing Game of 2010. It should be pretty obvious what's going to win, but, it is what it is. So the best role-playing game of 2010, at least in my opinion, is Mass Effect 2. If it's not Fallout New Vegas, it's this game. So, and again, the most important thing to me is the setting. I find the sci-fi aesthetic of this game to be way more my cup of tea as opposed to the post-apocalyptic alternate 50s shit that Fallout's for. Like that Fallout is. I just don't like that motif. If you're going to give me like an RPG with guns, I'd rather take Mass Effect. Which, of course, speaking of, reason why this is getting the nod is, well, this game has just overall better gameplay as opposed to the first game. The first game can feel a bit janky at points. Not that it's a bad game, but like you can definitely tell that it was a rough draft for what Mass Effect would eventually become. And, well, obviously this game proved that the formula of Mass Effect could work. And it did. Because again, this game has improved its shooting and even exploration, exploration gameplay. And just the general presentation is a lot cleaner. This game also has a better written story. Like, the characters are just way more fleshed out. They aren't just kind of, the typical, like, they weren't really like the one-note characters that they were in the first game. And, well, the stakes were definitely raised, especially considering the fact that, like, the Geth are pretty much, closing in a little bit more on, human territories, or really just, good guy territory. And, well, this game helped enrich a lot of the lore for the Mass Effect universe as a whole. And I do think that it works for its benefit. Like, I would definitely say, and this is going to be a bit of a, like, controversial take, but if I'm going to be honest, Mass Effect 2, honestly, is a good contender for best RPG of all time. So, if you want to make a good case for, like, one of the best RPGs ever, Mass Effect 2 is a good choice. So, and again, I know people fucking love Fallout New Vegas, but again, the setting kills it for me. So, also, that says Skyrim down below. What the fuck? Why does that say Skyrim? I don't know. I don't know why it says Skyrim down there. That's totally not, that totally didn't, ruin, like, people knowing the winner for 2011 at all, even though this is recorded after, but because we're going backwards, but okay. So, okay. But yeah, you get the point. Mass Effect 2, I do think is probably the best choice. And also, this came out very early in the year. This came out in, like, February of 2010? So the fact that, like, was the best RPG for a long, like, for that entire year, fair. But, of course, we gotta move on, because we were on that tangent for a long time. Let's get into the shooter category. But shooter game proper. Obviously, Mass Effect and Fallout have shooting mechanics, but I would not fully classify them as shooter games, period. These are the games that are first and third person shooters that I, would say would be pretty fair for this category. But did the Game Awards actually choose good games? Well, mostly yes, actually. I would say that most of the picks on here are very reasonable. It should be pretty obvious. Because, again, it's funny because we played all these games as far as, like, the stream is concerned. Like, I played all these games campaigns. But as far as best shooter game nominees, yeah, no, these are mostly easy pickings. Let's start off with Bad Company 2. So, I will admit, the campaign is pretty mid. Although, to be fair, part of that was ruined because the PlayStation 3 version is compromised. I tried streaming that game 2 years ago on the PlayStation 3 because I was kind of concerned about how it was going to work on PC. That, and also I played Bad Company 1 on PS3 because it's not on PC, which is really dumb, but whatever. And I will admit, Bad Company 2, as far, like, even Battlefield's more known for its multiplayer. Let's be real here. But, like, the campaign is better than it is in Bad Company 1. I just cannot get over those fucking glitches. That being said, Battlefield is, of course, more known for its multiplayer. And, yeah, no, the multiplayer fucking slaps in this game. There's a reason why people do consider this to be the best Battlefield game just straight up ever. And while it's definitely not my personal favorite, I do respect this game's continued ambition to improve upon a lot of the features that were, featured in every single Battlefield game prior to this. And, well, let's just say that this game's a massive improvement compared to the first Bad Company. Oh my god, it's night and day. So, that's all I gotta say about this game for now. But, of course, let's talk about Halo Reach. Halo Reach is, well, of course, last Bungie era Halo game, and it's the last Halo game that we streamed on the, we streamed this game last year. And yeah, no, the campaign is hella fun. Like, yeah, it serves as a prequel to the original Halo trilogy, but I think it works not only in this game's favor, so that it's not directly associated with the Master Chief plotline. There's some connections, but it's not like direct, like it's more indirect. But also, it showcases, of course, the fall of the planet Reach, of Covenant forces in the Human Covenant War for the context of this game's timeline. And I think the way in which they pretty much, did the story was pretty compelling. It isn't the longest campaign, but it works in its favor, and it's complemented by its, fantastic multiplayer. And of course, it's, third mode firefight, which is a much improved version of the original firefight from ODST. So as far as I'm concerned, Halo Reach, easy to be on here. But then we also have Black Ops 1. So, again, I'm always hesitant when it comes to Call of Duty games, when it comes to just Call of Duty in general, because admittedly, Black Ops, I don't know, Call of Duty is a very iffy and divisive franchise. However, I could make a good case that, Black Ops 1 does deserve to be on here. Because, it can stand on its own, even without the Call of Duty branding, and I'd still think people would love it if it was just called Black Ops. Yeah, because, campaign's pretty good, multiplayer, fun as hell, and let's not forget about zombies being pretty damn fun. 5's a better map, don't at me. It's better than Kino. So yeah, as far as, I'm concerned, Black Ops 1, pretty good. Yeah, I know it's also set in, the 60s, and I know I just complain about Fallout being 50s, 60s inspired, but the difference is that is 50s, 60s Americana. This is 60s military. There's a difference. So, I can tolerate it a bit more in this game. And again, I do think that this game holds up even on its own 2 feet. So, as far as I'm concerned, Battlefield Bad Company 2, Halo Reach, and Black Ops 1 are worthy games to be nominated. There's a reason why I'm ignoring BioShock 2, though. If you guys remember me streaming BioShock 2, I'm not going to lie, this game pissed me off. It actually pissed me off. Specifically because, well, okay, first of all, the story in the actual single player, I'm not gonna lie, was very underwhelming, especially when you compare it to BioShock 1 or even Infinite. It's very low stakes, and I do mean very, very, very low stakes. At least in comparison to the other games. And I was really not that compelled as far as like, you know, you playing as a big daddy in the game and trying to save, you know, your adopted daughter thing, it's confusing. The whole storyline, like, if you know the context of the big daddies, they're basically like, you know, prisoners of Rapture who are basically enslaved to work as like outside workers. So, and you know, they're put into they are put in trust with, like, you know, the little sisters, which are kind of like subservient children. It's creepy. I know it's meant to be creepy, but the fact that you're playing as a big daddy and you're trying to do that, it just doesn't work. That, and also the actual gameplay itself isn't really that much different from BioShock 1. As a matter of fact, I think it's actually worse because of the weaponry that you have in the game, because a lot of the weapons are hella weaker in this game compared to the first BioShock. And, well, as you guys already know, just like with Bad Company 2's campaign, I had nothing but constant technical issues with BioShock 2. This game was actually borderline unplayable on PC. It was infuriating to try to get this shit running. Like, every, like, hour, I remember, it kept crashing. And, again, because this game, unfortunately, doesn't have a consistent, like, save, you know, system, there were sections that I had to replay over and over and over and over and over and over again. It pissed me off. So, that, and also, I do think that, like, Dr. Lamb, or whatever her name is, she's a fucking lame villain. So, yeah, no, L, I'm just gonna straight up say this is the biggest L for this. Thankfully, this was not Hootyitis. If this was Hootyitis, I would have been so pissed with you guys right now. But they chose Black Ops 1, which, fair. It's a safe choice, but admittedly, if you're gonna choose, like, a shooter game, just make sure it's not BioShock 2. I know there's people who defend it, but, like, my bad experiences plus my major criticisms with it really do hinder the experience, and I cannot recommend BioShock 2 because of it. That being said, though, what would I end up choosing as opposed to the Game Awards? Well, I ended up, obviously, Bad Company 2 reaching Black Ops. They're still going to stay. But I'm going to choose 3 more games to be added on here. One of which is going to be a bit of a controversial one, but hear me out. And the angry mob has arrived as far as, you know, one of the games here. There you go. There you go. So, okay, we'll get to the angry mob in a little bit, but let's first talk about Metro 2033. So, this is a game that is made by a lot of the developers who originally worked on the Stalker games back in the day. That basically just kind of, let's just say, had less than hopeful ambitions because they were concerned about the direction in which Stalker took. And so they basically split off and made this game, which is based off of the Metro book, like, line of books. And this game is super linear, and it is a single-player game. So it does have a lot less replayability compared to a lot of other games. But I would argue that this is at least a good, like, groundwork for what Metro would eventually become with Last Light and Exodus. I do consider both of those games to be phenomenal. And while this game, I would definitely say, is probably the weakest of the 3 games, it is still a really good game in its own right. Like, if you want, like, a, you know, sort of, like, post-apocalypse setting that, like, you know, doesn't have a pretty cringe setting and also has, you know, a lot of, you know, sort of political tension tied into the gameplay itself, this is definitely your choice. This is at least the type of post-apocalyptic games I'm more interested in. This Stalker that one British game that like was revealed at the E3 trailers for like that Rebellion showcase that I can't remember the name of, games like that. That's what I'm more interested. I don't really care about the American setting. If you're gonna have a post-apocalyptic game, just don't set it in a 1950s America or alternate 1950s branch shoot alternate future from America, please. That's all I ask, but whatever, it is what it is. But yeah, Metro, good choice. Just Cause 2 is another good choice. Where the fuck was this? This was another game that got a lot of praise when it first came out, because it was a heavily improved version of like the first game. And this game's fun as hell. Like, it's mostly dumb fun, yes, but I don't care. Granted, this game I have a lot of just straight up weird memories about, because I remember back in 2010, my cousins first got around like April or like around springtime of 2010. I remember my cousins got Just Cause 2, and again, I just remember playing them. I remember them playing this game a lot. Just causing all of the chaos, as the game literally describes it. Every time you do like, chain kills, or like chain explosions, they literally pops up chaos. And him also just kind of grappling on to like all the trucks and cars, and using the parachute all around the entire island or archipelago, going up into the mountains, into the giant ass fortress. Like, admittedly, there's a little bit of a bias, but I will admit this game is still really fun, even just kind of beside, like, kind of those memories aside of my cousins playing this game. This game can still be a lot of fun. Granted, you can argue whether or not this or Just Cause 3 are better. Like, you can argue which one is better or worse, but you cannot deny that as far as, like, more open world style of third-person shooters, this game is a lot of fun. So, I'll give the game credit where credit is due. Why the hell was Splinter Cell Conviction right here? You guys are probably wondering. Well, okay, this game has a reputation. That's where the hate comments came in. The hate, thing. Basically, this game is considered like the worst Splinter Cell game. And here's the thing. I don't think that it is a bad game, like, at all. It's still a quality title. It's just not, like, a good Splinter Cell game. But it's a really good third-person shooter. I will give the game that. Like, it actually has a lot of surprisingly really fun shooter moments in it. I mean, the problem is that it's only a fucking 3-hour-long campaign. But, like, fucking... That's the one issue, at least gameplay-wise, that I have. Because this game also has... What really carries this game is the co-op campaign and Deniable Ops. Deniable Ops is so much fun. Basically, it's a co-op sort of, series of missions in which you go through taking out as many enemies as you can, or just stealthing an entire area from point A to point B as fast as you can. And it has all of, like, the traditional Splinter Cell gear and, like, guns and all that fun stuff. Yeah, well, obviously the guns, but, like, you have the goggles, is what I'm trying to say. So, it does offer a traditional Splinter Cell gameplay that's really fucking underrated. It's just not in the actual campaign. So, yeah, that's the problem. But regardless, though, I do consider Splinter Cell to be a good enough game that I could personally warrant a recommendation. And hell, even if you disagree with me, guess what? Scores online, they're pretty positive as far as I'm concerned. Like, I saw like on Metacritic 81% from critics and 7.9 from users. So people do like the game. It's just a bit of a contentious one for hardcore fans. So yeah, suffice to say, I do think this is a good game. So there's the hating. Give me. Of course. There's the Splinter Cell. But keep in mind, there are better Splinter Cell games. And also, you will be hella confused if you do not play Double Agent. You kind of need to play Splinter Cell Double Agent if you want to know what's going on in this game. You don't have to technically play the other 3 games before it, even though I recommend you guys play the first 3 games anyways. But yeah, I don't know, Splinter Cell from like 2006 to about 2012 was kind of a weird transitionary era for Splinter Cell. So, but it is what it is. Let's go over the winner then. So, sorry about that. So, the award for the best shooter game of 2010 goes to Halo Reach. I don't think I'm going to really spend too much time on this, especially since, I played this game myself and I even played a little bit of the firefight for you guys. But all you need to really know is that, like, it is a compelling prequel campaign to the main Halo storyline. I do consider this to be, a really good addition to the Halo franchise as far as, like, establishing some, like, lore tidbits. The multiplayer, I do think is pretty fun, though I cannot really recommend you guys... Okay, well, obviously they shut down the original Xbox 360 servers for the game a couple of years ago, so you can't play the original anymore. The only way for you to play the multiplayer is through MCC, but do not play this game or any other Halo game as far as multiplayer through the quick search option. You will be playing with like the most hardcore sweaty nerds of all time. Play in private play this game in private, play this game either in private matches or play it in through the the server search thing or whatever. Make sure you do that. Do not use quick search. You will have the worst time of all. Like, you will have the worst time ever if you do that. But I just need to preface that right now. But anyways, which of course, speaking of the experience, this game has one of the best progression systems of just all of gaming, because you earn the game by obviously, like, each match you earn credits, and those credits can be used to buy a bunch of the armor like a lot of the armor pieces for your custom Spartan, and you unlock them in a pretty reasonable manner. You're not going to feel like you're going to be grinding in a sense that it feels like you're wasting your time. This game has a really good progression. And, well, also this game has in a way improved firefight mode from that was originally an ODST. They brought it back in this game, and it's overhauled to where there's way more customizable options you can do in this. It's insane. My one issue is that, like, even though there's drones in the campaign for Halo Reach, they're not in firefight for whatever reason. I know drones are kind of annoying, but, like, it'd be cool to have the option to have them, or at least more consistently, but maybe there's some sort of a mod on MCC, like on PC for that, but Which, speaking of customizable options, this game's Forge is probably arguably one of the best forges for Halo. Like, you can do so much with the Forge mode in this game. It's insane. And, well, it pains me to say, but this honestly was the last great Halo game. Like, this was the last Bungie game like this last game made by Bungie before they unfortunately went over to do the Destiny bullshit. And well, let's just say that Bungie suffered from, them working on the Destiny franchise, and unfortunately Halo suffered because of 343 butchering the entire, IP for the past 12 years. It's pretty sad. So, but as a last hurrah, Halo Reach serves its purpose. So as far as I'm concerned, this may be the last true Halo game in my opinion. Nothing can deny that this is still a quality title. So go check out Halo Reach. Hell, I would even recommend this being the first game that you guys play, since this is a standalone game for the most part. So it has story beats tied to the original trilogy, but it's not necessary to play the other games in order for you to play this. You can pretty much play this without any knowledge of the previous Halo games, and you'll be fine. So go check it out. All right, next category, Sim Strategy. So I will admit the Sim Strategy category was... this one was a bit of an iffy one, because if I'm going to be honest, while the RPG category was definitely the weakest category for games, this honestly was the second worst. Especially since this year took a massive beating with the RTS genre in particular. Because this was the year that brought us Command & Conquer 4. Not only the worst Command & Conquer game, but arguably one of the worst strategy games of all time. And then we also had Total War Napoleon. I'm not going to repeat my sentiments on that game. I think that game is trash. So, two massive blows as far as the sim strategy genre is concerned. But all is forgiven because we had in its place other really quality titles. So this first game is another one that is going to be a bit of a contentious one. Supreme Commander 2. So this is obviously the sequel to the 2007 RTS game. And, well, let's just say that this game was met with a lot more harsh criticism compared to the first game because of the way in which they scaled down the maps. Because that's what Supreme Commander was known for, is the fact that it was such an open and huge layout as far as maps are concerned. The maps the battles that you fight in Supreme Commander were huge. It was insane. But then they scaled it back down a bit in the sequel. And while I at least understand why people would be annoyed by that, I don't necessarily think that makes for a bad game. As a matter of fact, this game is still pretty good in its own right. And just like with Splinter Cell Conviction, despite, gamers being very passionately, visceral against this on fucking sites like Reddit, if you go on Metacritic, it shows otherwise. So people do like this game, but I will recognize that it is weaker than the first, but that's not to say that this is a bad game at all. And I would personally recommend you guys check it out. So if you want large scale, massive RTS style battles, Supreme Commander 2 is a pretty good option. Which, well, that then leads us into the first Blizzard game that I feel comfortable actually nominating. Yeah, we reached the era. We finally reached the era in which I don't have to talk shit about Blizzard for once. I can actually give them a little bit of credibility and praise. So, yeah, and that leads us, of course, into StarCraft 2: Wings of Liberty. So this, of course, was the long-awaited sequel to StarCraft 1, which originally released in 1998. And, well, of course, this is a, sequel to that, and, a much improved version of StarCraft's original formula. So it has the same three major factions that you saw in the first game. So yeah, it has humanity, it has the the other two alien races. So that's not changed. But as far as like how the game plays, it plays more like whereas Supreme Commander 2 is much more macro as far as RTS are concerned. This one's definitely more on the micro. What I mean by that is that like with Supreme Commander, you're more just focused on like the overarching, battle itself. Whereas with StarCraft 2, it's more focused on the skirmishes that like the individual like fights that happen within the battle. So as far as I'm concerned, as far as a game that does that particular thing well, StarCraft 2 is a pretty good choice. So I would recommend you guys check out StarCraft 2. Well, okay, let me phrase that. If you can tolerate the Blizzard app, StarCraft 2 is a pretty cool game to check out. So, because again, fuck Blizzard with its stupid app. They should just move all their games to Steam by now, or at least the fucking Epic Store. I'd rather use the Epic Store than the fucking Blizzard app. So, but whatever. But of course, that then leads us into Victoria 2, which, well, we've talked about. I think we talked about Victoria 3 in our 2022 list, if I'm not mistaken. We've definitely talked about a lot of other Paradox Interactive games. This, of course, being the sequel to Victoria, which I think came out in 2003 originally. So, another long-awaited sequel. Again, a lot of long-awaited sequels from 2010. But, yeah, no, this game, I will admit, the more and more we get into the 2000s, the more hesitant I start recommending Paradox games, because the newer games by Paradox, I would definitely say, are way more streamlined overall. Like, they're way easier to get into. But, like, these older games are a bit rough. As in, like, you may not necessarily know what the hell you're doing. So, not necessarily a bad game, but definitely more of a recommendation for, like, hardcore grand strategy fans. That is what I would definitely recommend with this. So if you can tolerate that, then it is what it is. But then we've also got this little diamond in the rough right here. We've got ourselves Ruse. So this actually, funny enough, this is made by the same developers who made the Steel Division games, which caught me a little bit by surprise, because I did not know that that studio was around since the 2000s. But yeah, they've been around since the 2000s. And this is basically a precursor to game to the Steel Division games. Like, it's like, I saw gameplay, and yeah, it's literally the same game, just published, I think, by Ubisoft, right? So unfortunately, I think you can't, like, hold on. I need to double check something on Steam. Which, by the way, yes, I am well aware that the Steam Summer Sale is up right now. So if anyone wants to check that out, you guys can. So, yeah, fuck, you can't get it on Steam anymore. But you can still play it on console. It's a console game. So, matter of fact, I think it was originally released on console, which is interesting because, I would have never thought this would have been on console at first. It's another RTS where it honestly is, it's basically more so just if the battles from Total War were the entire game. That's essentially what, like, Steel Division and Ruse are. So if that's something that interests you, go check it out. Again, it might be a bit hard to find on PC. You might have to, matter of fact, yeah, might have to pull out a thing for that. But as far as, like, just a game in its own right, I think it looks pretty cool enough to recommend. And yes, to wrap up the STEM strategy category, of course, we cannot talk about 2010 without talking about Civilization 5. This fucking game, Civ 5 is one of the games of all time, but not in a bad way. This game is praised by so many people as being one of the greatest turn-based grand strategy games of all time. And there's also good reason for that, because I mean it's much easier to get into than Victoria 2. It also helps that this game basically is just Civ 4, but like way more streamlined, way more polished with the UI, and it runs way better on like modern systems. Not that Civ 4 can't run on modern systems, but Civ 5, it runs like a dream. And there's so much you can do as far as diplomacy, as far as conquering, as far as the individual battles, the unit roster, the building roster. Like, it's insane. So, and, well, this might sound weird coming from me, but this honestly could be useful for something as a bit of an education tool. So, again, that's not something like I usually like to bring up in a lot of games, because again, like, edutainment isn't really like, my cup of tea. But, I would argue that like Civilization 5 could help you learn about, decent ways in which you deal with diplomacy, and also just kind of the way in which other, civilizations can work out. Except for Gandhi. Gandhi is an asshole in this game. Old, Gandhi goes to war meme, for those who aren't aware, because again, you get to choose like a historical figure, and just kind of lead like the country that they're associated with. So I shouldn't have to explain. Most gamers know, even most non-gamers know what the fuck people talk about when it comes to Civ 5's Gandhi. But whatever. It's a fucking meme. I know it's old as fuck, but I still think it's funny. So, but memes and jokes aside, Civ 5 is unironically a really fun game, and I would recommend you guys check it out. Even as someone who does prefer games like Total War, Civ 5 still pretty fun. But of course, let's get into the winner. So, the award for the best sim strategy game of 2010 goes to Civ Meyer's Civilization 5. Okay. It was close between this and StarCraft 2, but if we're gonna be honest here, I do think that Civ 5 is the game that probably is the correct choice here. I mean, this game pretty much changed the game for Civilization as a franchise. It is the definitive 4X game that I would highly recommend. Now, granted, there is Civ 6, to be fair, and Civ 6 is an amazing game in its own right as well. But Civ 5 basically was the thing that allowed Civ 6 to exist. Because, even though this game, again, is essentially a more polished version of Civilization 4, it built upon what they did with that absolute rework of the game, because that game basically overhauled the entire Civilization series as a whole as well, and basically just ran with it. Like, it doubled down, and it made it way more accessible for people to get into. And because of the extended customizable options for, the locales, and just the amount of factions you can have on one map, it adds infinite replayability to any match you want to play. And, well, as a bit of a bonus, not necessarily something that affects the score too much, but this game has a dedicated mod support community on both ModDB, and on Steam's workshop. So go check out Civilization 5. You will not regret it. So, but of course, we're talking a lot about, categories that admittedly kind of get a bad rep. Sports, racing, and fighting games do kind of get a bad rep, but this year was also a pretty good year for this particular category. And again, I'm kind of starting to get more and more out of my shell against these types of games. Like, I've been getting more and more into racing and kart games as of late. And, well, this was a good year to be a race game fanatic, because it brought us Blur, Need for Speed Hot Pursuit, and Gran Turismo 5. I'll talk about Skate 3 in a little bit. So let's talk about Blur, which, yes, if you guys remember my my grunge tier list, sorry, my nose is kind of getting stuffy, so it's up, yeah. But you guys remember on my grunge tier list, I used this as opposed to, like, you know, like for Blur, as opposed to their actual logo, the band Blur, for their actual logo, because I couldn't find like another logo for this, so whatever. Blur, the game, not to be confused with a British band, British pop slash punk slash kind of grunge in their early days. I know people gave me shit for that, but fuck you. This is actually a pretty cool game, because this is not only a bit more on the arcadey side as far as racing games are concerned, but this game honestly feels more like a kart racer than it does like a straight up, you know, regular racing game, because of the abilities that kind of spawn in on the racetracks, which is admittedly a bit of a breath of fresh air as far as racing games are concerned. Because, again, most racing games, they either go the more realistic route, stuff like Forza or Gran Turismo, or, they try to go for more, or like they go the kart route, stuff like Mario Kart or Crash Team Racing and stuff like that. This game basically just combined both of those worlds into one, and it works all the wonders for it. If you guys can find a copy of Blur, it's pretty fun. You know what else is also pretty fun? Need for Speed Hot Pursuit. There's been plenty of Need for Speed games that have released in the past 14 years that I haven't really brought up, mostly because I feel like a lot of the games have very, very mixed reception. Like, there's I did not feel comfortable nominating a single Need for Speed game quite yet, until Need for Speed Hot Pursuit. This game basically was the game that a lot of people had a lot of high promise for this franchise in the 2010s, because Need for Speed established itself as being the definitive multi-platform racing franchise that pretty much helped popularize racing games as we know them. Well, at least back in the day. They're not really much common nowadays, but obviously Need for Speed was kind of like the franchise for that. And this game in particular is my personal favorite style of Need for Speed game. The cop chase games. The cop chase games are so damn fun. And this game is no exception to that. And yes, the name does derive from the original Need for Speed Hot Pursuit, like Need for Speed 3 Hot Pursuit from, I think, 1999. And then they made Hot Pursuit 2 back in, like, 2001, I believe. So this game is sort of a light, I guess, sort of rehashed of that. It's not a remake. It's just a sequel. But it takes that sort of cop chase formula and does pretty damn well with it. Like, I do think this game's pretty fun. And you're talking to someone who, not until recently, didn't give a shit about racing games. So, check out Hot Pursuit. And thankfully, they did recently remaster it. So, go check it out. And then we have Gran Turismo 5, which I will admit, out of the racing games we have on here, this one's the most iffy one from what I can tell, because a lot of people are pretty iffy with Gran Turismo 5, at least in comparison to Gran Turismo 4 and 6. But I still think that Gran Turismo 5 is also a pretty quality game. And I mean, it should go without saying that, like, a lot of racing games, for whatever reason, are really beautiful. Like, even to this day. Like, I remember, like, I was playing Gran Turismo 5 last year, and the game still looks beautiful, despite the fact that it came out 14 years ago. Like, it's actually insane how beautiful this game is, and also how well that game controls as well. Like, there's so much. Sorry, I heard like a bit of a wobble. I don't know what that was. Yeah, there's like a lot of like oh no, where's the mouse? Ah, damn it, hold on. The mouse is gone for stupid reasons. Okay, there we go. Sorry. So yeah, like this game also so yeah, like as far as like, the game looks, it's pretty good, as well as far as its controls, it's pretty good as well. It also God, I keep stuttering. I apologize. Gran Turismo 5 is a good game. Don't pretend that it isn't. And then, of course, we got Skate 3, which, yeah, again, has its critics. It has its problems, at least in comparison to Skates 1 and 2. But as far as wrapping up the Skate trilogy, this game pretty much did as well as it could. It's just a more polished version of Skate 2, but with, just more quality of life stuff. It's not completely reinventing the wheel, pun intended, but it's still a fun skateboarding game that offers a good alternative to the Tony Hawk franchise. So that's at least how I see the skate games, so as a whole. And, well, this game is continuing that, last stage of that legacy. And I hope to God that new skate game isn't going to suck ass. Please, EA, don't ruin another franchise that you're digging out of its grave. Please don't fucking pull another Dungeon Keeper. I swear to God. Which, by the way, Dungeon Keeper 2 just recently had its 25th anniversary, but whatever. We're not talking about 1999, we're talking about 2010. So let's get into the winner for the 2010 sports racing fighting game category, which I know there's not really a fighting game on here, and skateboarding barely counts as a sport, but whatever. I don't care. It's my stream. So, the award to the best sport racing fighting game of 2010 goes to Need for Speed Hot Pursuit. So, I mean, yeah. If a Need for Speed game was gonna win, this is one of the contenders that could easily win. So, this game was a return to the amazing cop chase formula that a lot of people loved, because that was kind of missing since Need for Speed Most Wanted, because a lot of people, or Most Wanted 2005, because a lot of the games that kind of came in between were more focused on either more story-driven stuff or just straight up just normal racing. And while that's not a bad thing, that's not necessarily, at least what I go for Need for Speed for. If I wanted to go to a franchise for more urban racing environments, I go to Gran Turismo. If I wanted to go for more outdoor environmental racing, I would go to Forza. With Need for Speed, I go for the cop chases. I think most people go to the cop chases for Need for Speed, which fair, because this game has, excellent cop chases, and this game has 2 really cool career modes that you can pretty much go throughout the entire game for. And well, yes, even though that you do start and finish on the same track, you have enough flexibility to pretty much choose whatever tracks you want in between those. So yeah, you can pretty much replay the game for as many times as you can without feeling like you're playing the same game over and over and over again. And that's something I can appreciate this game for doing. This game also improved a lot of the driving physics compared to some of the previous games, because this game kind of serves as a good middle ground between the old school Need for Speed and what Need for Speed would eventually become. For better or for worse, this was the direction that Need for Speed was going, and well, in a lot of people's it went for the worse. In some other people's minds, it was for the better. But you cannot deny that Need for Speed Hot Pursuit is a quality title that I would recommend to anyone. And thankfully, because they did remaster this game recently, you don't have to worry about them, removing the game because of some bullshit licensing agreement. You can pretty much buy the game still. It's on sale right now. I would recommend you guys check it out. So, and again, like I said, this game is so fucking beautiful. Like, oh my god. Like, even like just watching regular gameplay of like the original game. That game's from 2010? It's not from 2024? Yeah. So, I don't know. Racing games have always been like, impressive as far as like graphics. I don't know how, they just are. Point is, this game's awesome. Go check it out. And that's coming from someone who is just a newer racing game fan. So, I'd recommend. Alright, best multiplayer. So, of course, this is where we start to kind of, speed things up a little bit because a lot of the games from this point onwards are going to be a lot of the same games we've talked about because multiplayer games, I try to, kind of keep a lot of the same games. And, of course, art direction, narrative, and game of the year, same case. So, but what did the Game Awards end up choosing? Honestly, for once, all solid choices. For once. You know what? That deserves a clap, actually. Yeah, thank you. Please clap for that. Because, this never happens for the Game Awards. And again, we're talking about the Spike Game Awards here. The guys who, like I said earlier, are more obsessed about, being blatantly sexist rather than actually, giving a good, showcases. So, I hate to be blunt about that, but that's kind of true. But yeah, no, these are all pretty good choices. Like I already mentioned, Bad Company 2, really, really solid improvement of the original Bad Company as far as its gameplay design. So, fair enough. StarCraft 2, of course, long-awaited sequel, but is well worth the wait because as far as the real-time strategy genre is concerned, yeah, this was kind of in the dying days of that genre, but this showed that there could still be some teeth to the genre by, focusing a bit more on the macros, the micro scale as far as managing individual units. It adds a lot to the addictive gameplay. Halo Reach, of course, with its, granted some stripped down features as far as I'm concerned, but makes up for it for the, abilities that they added in, some of the new weapons, some of the new vehicles, and the new maps really do add to Halo Reach's gameplay. Just fuck armor lock. That's the one thing that is a bit of an issue with Halo Reach's multiplayer, unfortunately. And then we have Black Ops 1, which, well, is a quality Call of Duty multiplayer experience. Because at the end of the day, most of the maps at launch are pretty solid. The guns feel very smooth and clean to use. And obviously, this is the game that brought in wager matches, which wager matches are fun as hell. Yeah, this also brought in game modes like One in the Chamber. I think Gun Game was also introduced in Black Ops 1, if I'm not mistaken. Or was that Modern Warfare? No, that was Black Ops 1. Yeah. And Sticks and Stones. Sticks and Stones is underrated. Fight me on that one. So, and of course, this game had a ton of amazing kill streaks. So, all really, really good choices as far as best multiplayer. I'm shocked. I actually am kind of shocked. The Game Awards never get the multiplayer nominees right. So that's why I'm giving this praise, because finally we have one solid year where they did not have a bad multiplayer line of games. So yeah, any of these games I would be fine winning. Which Halo Reach ended up winning. Fair enough. Just fuck armor lock though. So Can we still improve this, though? I mean, we can definitely still add in, like, you know, maybe 1 or 2 more games. I ended up deciding to only add in 1 more. In this particular thing, I have decided to add in Sid Meier's Civilization 5. Because, well, it should be pretty obvious. Although, I think I'm going to add in 1 more. Just for the sake of variety. So, because admittedly, a lot of shooters and quite a few strategy games. But I'm going to add in an underdog pick. Because I want to sort of exemplify just how solid of a game that this particular game is. So, let me add it for you guys in a second. Oh, no, and Alright, there we go. So, I decided that not only is Civ 5 also going to be nominated, I'm also going to nominate Lara Croft and the Guardian of Light. Why? Because, as I said, this is a fun-ass co-op game. Like, if you want to play with, like, another buddy, you know, through a series of puzzle action challenges, this game is still a very solid choice. Yeah, it was kind of a forgotten game, but I would genuinely say that I would recommend this game to anyone who wants to have a bit more of a flavor for, you know, multiplayer. So, especially in the co-op scene. And of course, like I said, Civ 5, if you just kind of want to meme around and, you know, play as Gandhi and then play as, who's another, like, you know, character? I guess, who's the Aztec emperor? I don't remember his name. It's not Mesomoto, right? I don't know how to pronounce his name, but you get the point. Is you could pretty much play so you can play so many scenarios with Civ 5. It's insane. And even though I understand why they didn't end up having games like these two, they wanted to focus more on just kind of games that appeal to like a more broad male crowd. Because again, this is the Spike Game Awards we're talking about. I'm willing to give both of these games a bit of a nod as far as the multiplayer side of things are. But of course, there can only be one winner. So, God, I've been talking a lot. But again, 2010 had a lot of really good games. So, I got to make sure that I can explain myself. But in any event, here we go. So the award for the best multiplayer game of 2010 goes to Battlefield Bad Company 2. Yeah. I feel like I've been doing Battlefield a disservice for the past several streams. And I have to sincerely apologize to it because I love Battlefield. And I will admit, the more recent streams where I have been playing Battlefield, I had to sincerely apologize to the audience as well because I get very, very, very pissed off in certain scenarios when playing Battlefield. Call of Duty as well, but especially Battlefield. But it's mostly out of passion rather than hatred for the game. Because I like the more open landscapes of fighting. Well, I like the more open landscape field battles as opposed to like the more close quarter battles of stuff like Halo or Call of Duty. And it just makes it feel like I'm actually in like a battle. But unlike a tactical shooter like Hell Let Loose or with Squad, because the time to kill is not as quick, like it's a bit slower, it makes for a more immersive experience, at least in my opinion. But why did this win? Well, first of all, this game is a huge improvement as far as multiplayer compared to the previous game. Oh my god, the last two Battlefield games that came out before this, Bad Company 1 in 1943, were actually embarrassments. I got shit for that, but I don't care. Bad Company 1 was multiple steps backwards in comparison to the Refractor Engine games in both gameplay and just representative of what Battlefield should be. This game pretty much fixed all of the damage that was done in the late 2000s with the Battlefield franchise at the time. And, well, it showed that, you know, it can stand on its own as far as, you know, a game first and an immersive battle second. Also, this game pretty much nailed the way in which the destructible environments work, especially on this game's mostly pretty good map design. There are some maps that are kind of stinkers, I will admit, but as far as, like, you know, the way in which maneuverability works, the fucking motorcycles, I swear to God, this game does it pretty good to a T. And I will admit, the weapon balancing, for the most part, except for the fucking NS2000 shotgun, that thing is annoying as shit to deal with. The weapons are pretty balanced. Like, I wouldn't say that other than that annoying shotgun, that, like, any other weapon is, like, OP per se. Like, everything is pretty much viable. And, well, as a bit of a hint for the next category, because of, well, the rule that we had for the, you know, DLC, the Vietnam expansion is pretty fun as well. Like, if you guys can get your hands on it, go check it out. Unfortunately, of course, this is the disappointing part, is that, well, you can no longer buy Battlefield on Steam anymore. So you're gonna have to pull up a hook for this one, ladies and gentlemen. So, and I am just gonna straight up endorse you guys pirate this game, because if EA doesn't want to fucking sell it anymore, then, like, just find the fucking game for yourself and download the, I think it's the Venice client or, like, the Rome client. It's one of those two, where you can actually play games online. So, because they shut down the servers for this game a year and a half ago, which wounded me and many other Battlefield players. Though there's still a bunch of fan servers that are open. It's just the official servers are no longer really a thing. So do keep that in mind. I would still recommend you guys check this game out, though. And thankfully, it's not a Titanfall situation where the game's absolutely unplayable. You can still play this game. It's just they aren't selling it on Steam anymore. So you're going to either have to find a physical copy or you're going to have to pirate it. So don't even bother on PlayStation or Xbox, unless if, like, there's fan servers for that as well, but I can't guarantee that. So, but in any event, let's get on to the DLC. So, obviously with my rule, I don't want to nominate any DLC that is from a game that came out in 2010. You're going to see quite a bit of that on this. But I'm not going to give too much shit to the Game Awards for doing this, because, you know, most people would like to, you know, recommend this stuff anyways. So it just doesn't make me feel comfortable, because it wouldn't be fair for a bunch of the amazing downloadable content that existed in previous year, like from games that were released in previous years. So, but they ended up choosing 50-50. I'd say the lamest one in here is the Minerva's Den. Again, BioShock 2, not worth it in my eyes. I played this expansion, and I thought it was kind of lame. I just didn't really see the appeal with this all that much. Also, that is definitely a fucking clone trooper helmet. What the fuck is with that antenna thing? I just realized. Okay. So yeah, like, I don't know about, like, that per se. I guess the other one I'm kind of iffy about is with the Borderlands 1 DLC. Now, this one would qualify for a list that I would make because the game came out in 2009. This is a 2010 DLC for a 2009 game. So, fair. I guess I'm just kind of iffy with Borderlands because I don't know. I don't hate Borderlands. It's just I feel like it's just not really my thing. So that's kind of why. Also, that's a very 40k looking guy right there. Yeah, General Knox. I bet you anything that like they definitely were trying to do like a 40k thing. Knowing that they do a bunch of pop cultural references, I wouldn't be too surprised. But I don't know. And also, well, I've not seen any gameplay for this, so I can't really nominate this anyways. So. And then, of course, with Mass Effect 2's Lair of the Shadowbroker and Red Dead Redemption's Undead Nightmare, as amazing as I've heard great things about Undead Nightmare, as a matter of fact, I even have the game physically on PlayStation 3 back there, right next to, like, right in between the base game and Resistance 1. I just can't endorse it because, again, this is a game that originally came out in 2010 with the DLC that came out in 2010. That's just a bit weird to me. And also, this game is basically just Red Dead Redemption 1, but with zombies. And I'm just kind of sick and tired of the zombie motif for a lot of games. If you guys know, you guys know. But it did end up winning, which, I mean, begrudgingly, I would probably say that, like, I may have agreed. I don't know. If I were to have chose between, like, this and the other ones, I probably would personally choose Mass Effect 2's thing. That's just me personally. What about DLC from other year, like from games that released in the past that I would recommend? We got ourselves a full list, ladies and gentlemen, for once for the DLC category. So, yeah, I was able to conjure up 6 DLCs for games that came out in 2008 and 9. 2007 as well for TF2, but we'll get to that. So, first off, we got 40k Dawn of War 2, Chaos Rising, which I know, like, I gave praise to Retribution, the other DLC pack, but I actually do think I prefer this one, mostly because, well, I'm a I'm a chaos-based Marine player, so as far as 40k is concerned, so like I'm a little bit biased. I wish that there was better customization like in Dawn of War 1. I don't know. Dawn of War 2 is just, I don't hate Dawn of War 2. I just have massive problems with it, at least in comparison to Dawn of War 1. Because with Dawn of War 1, it's much more of a traditional RTS, which is what I prefer. And then with Dawn of War 2, they made it into like a RTS MOBA hybrid. And I just am not a fan of the fact that they tried to turn it more into a MOBA. I don't know. That's just something that I never really vibed with. It's still, you can still have fun in Dawn of War 2. Don't get it twisted. I just don't like the fact that like you can't really base build in the game. I like being able to like, build more buildings so that you can build up your troops. That's just something that I prefer in my RTS games. So that's just me personally though. So it's still a good expansion. I would still recommend you guys check it out, especially if you want to get into, well, especially if you're someone who is a Chaos player like myself. So, I mean, for fuck's sake. Okay, let me pull it out for context. Oh, wait, where is it? Oh, it's over there. Okay. No, I still had it in my... Oh my god. Oh my god. There we go. So, yeah. Yeah. I got my Slaneshi themed Chaos Boys and gals in here. So, granted, I haven't been painting these guys, mostly because I just have been busy with other projects. But yeah, I've got myself a Helldrake, I've got Master Possessions, we got some Raptors, Chaos Sorcerer Lord, Demonettes, not Hellflayer, just this general Slanesh Chariot. And then down here I've got like fucking 20 I think Chaos Marines, and I got like 5 Terminators down there. So suffice to say, I'm a bit biased. Like, even though I don't care about Dawn of War 2 that much, I would still recommend this pack for anyone who is into that gameplay, but is kind of upset that like you can't play Chaos. Says you can play Chaos in that, even if you can't use like Hellrakes or some shit like that. And well, let's just say that like game developers are allergic to anything Slanesh related, which I guess fair, cause like you can only do so much with Slanesh without making the game rated M. It's strictly rated M, and like also without showing like too much booby. So, but it is what it is. Well, I've been on that 40k point a lot. I want to move on to the other DLC. So, okay, Dragon Age Origins. Let's move away from sci-fi. Let's go to fantasy. Dragon Age Origins, of course, is the legendary Dragon Age game that came out the year prior. They released an expansion pack back in 2010, Awakening, and yeah, no, this expansion pretty solid in its own right. Definitely more of a it's a story expansion, I would say. Adds in more enemies, adds in more story, like character dialogue, more character-based options. So, as far as that's concerned, that's got you covered, and is pretty solid. I would definitely recommend you guys check that out, especially since like a lot of people do give that DLC a lot of praise. So there you go. And then okay, this next one, I was actually confused at first on whether or not I wanted to include it, because I was like, is this really an expansion pack? But then I checked the sorry about that fucking voice, but yeah, was this an expansion pack? So yeah, I checked the description on the Steam page for this, and yeah, this is an expansion pack, which is kind of weird to me because I thought this was its own game, because this thing has DLC. So yeah, an expansion. Yeah, there's DLC for an expansion pack. That's weird. I don't know if I fully like that, but regardless, Mountain Blade is a series that I did talk about briefly in one of our other streams. I think it was in the 2022 list. And Mountain Blade, I respect. I do find that Mountain Blade is a series that is kind of on like not really on a lot of people's radars, and I don't think that's I think that's not entirely fair, because like as far as hack and slash multiplayer games are concerned, yeah, Warband is a lot of fun, especially with the Viking and Napoleonic DLCs. Oh my god, you can have a ton of fun with both of those. So yeah, no, as far as I'm concerned, yeah, no, if you want like a cool sort of like medieval inspired hack and slash set in like a fictional fantasy setting, similar to something like Chivalry, Mountain Blade is definitely up your alley, and it also helps that it does predate Chivalry. So there you go, right there. And then of course we've got The Sims 3. I had a choice between Nightlife and Ambitions, because I wanted to focus on the expansion packs because stuff packs aren't very good. So I ended up choosing Ambitions because with Nightlife, while you can definitely, well, I do, if I'm going to be honest, I do think I prefer the stuff that's added in Nightlife. I feel like that's kind of more of a specific vibe because, well, you know, it's more of a club and party based like expansion for The Sims 3. Whereas with Ambitions, this one adds in a ton of jobs. And well, I'm just gonna be frank, because well, this DLC or expansion has more bang for your buck than like literally any of the fucking DLC from The Sims 4. So like, I know I'm taking hot shots at The Sims 4, who doesn't do that. But jokes aside, Sims 3 Ambitions is definitely a solid, you know, pack if you want to get more options for careers for your Sims. As you can see, yeah, there's stuff like firefighter, there's dentist, there's tech guy. Like it adds in like I think like 6 or 7 different careers, and they feel way more tangible than even the ones that are in the base game. Like you're more directly involved with those. Granted, you can't really go inside the buildings that you work in still. That wouldn't be until the Sims 4's expansions. And, well, Sims 4 unfortunately fucked up with, you know, it being way too expensive. But, you know, that's a story for another day. But I would still say that The Sims 3 Ambitions is definitely one of the better ones. And it's much more, I think, overall rounded as far as, like, Sims content compared to Nightlife. Not to say that Nightlife is bad, but you can definitely make a good case on either or. And then, of course, next up we've got Arma 2's Operation Arrowhead. So definitely more on the tactical shooter side. This is an expansion to Arma 2, as the name implies, taking place more in a desert environment. So it has more desert combat related stuff. So obviously it would definitely be inspired by the conflicts of Iraq and Afghanistan and Somalia, whether you like it or not. But it offers you know, a lot of the similar content that was in Arma 2. And so if you want a more, you know, hardcore tactical, you know, expansion, there you go. And then last but not least, we have surprisingly the TF2 engineer update. So, as far as like updates to Team Fortress 2 are concerned, there's some that are a bit more popular than others, but as far as the ones that came out in 2010, I would say that this one added in the most content that at least I'm personally interested in. So, first of all, this added in a lot new like weapons and tools for the engineer. Stuff like the Wrangler and the Frontier Justice, and like, yeah, weapons like that. Yeah, the Southern Hospitality, the Gunslinger, which I guess the Southern Hospital. Wait, no, wait, is that the wrench that like? Shit, what's the wrench that makes you hit your thing faster? I don't remember. But, I mean, the Gunslinger and the Wrangler, those are hella used weapons in TF2. And I use the Frontier Justice as my main primary for the engineer. So, as far as I'm concerned, not just the weapons are pretty good that they added, but it's not just the weapons. The maps that they added in this were pretty kino as well. Specifically Upward and Thunder Mountain. Thunder Mountain, I do feel like a lot of people don't really look at too fondly. I just personally like it myself because of just the fact that it is a bit more. I guess I like it for its first and final areas. Its second area is unfortunately a bit too linear, at least for my liking. But I do like those first and third sections. And you cannot deny that Upward is like that. Upward is an iconic TF2 map. Like, it's one of the most popular maps for a reason. I personally really love Upward. And so, you know, them adding that into the rotation was pretty awesome. And they also added in High Tower and Cold Front. Cold Front being a pretty, good, snowy TF2 map. You don't really get a lot of official snowy TF2 maps anymore. So, or really just ever, I should say. So to have a map like that did help break up the monotony of like the desert maps that they kept, releasing every goddamn minute. So it is unfortunate though with what's going on with TF2 because of the bot problem. Again, fuck you, fucking Valve, for not actually fixing the game. Like, god damn it. So this one admittedly is the most tenuous of all the choices on here, but it's still good to recognize a good update whenever it's a good update. So that then leads us to the question, what's the best expansion or DLC or updates? Well, got it right here, as always, because, well, why not? So, the award for the best DLC/expansion of 2010 goes to Dragon Age Origins Awakening. So, yeah, I would say this is probably at least the best one, at least for me. Because, I mean, this just adds in more content to an already pretty amazing expansion. It continued a lot of the excellent like gameplay and combat stuff that you saw in the first game, which of course, fair enough. But also this added in a lot more branching quest lines that pretty much added in, more ways that you can get XP and more like, stuff for your characters. And frankly, the choices in this game or in this DLC actually matter more than the base game. Like the the characters that you recruit admittedly can be a bit iffy with the base game. So to have the DLC add a bit more higher stakes to your companions do make it a bit more tense. And this is a long expansion pack. Like, as far as expansions are concerned, like this is definitely on the lengthier side. So you definitely get your money's worth as far as, DLC. And I think that's ultimately what puts this on the edge. Is that you get your bangs for your buck. So go check it out if you guys haven't already. It's, I think, included already with the version of Dragon Age Origins that they already have on Steam. So that's pretty awesome. Alright, so now this is where we get to finally speed things up. So best art direction, of course, it's about the best visual style and just general look of a game. I will admit, 2010, I guess the late 2000s and 2010s was definitely an era where a lot of more cartoony or more artsy looking games didn't really get a lot of attention, which you guys know me, I'm personally much more a fan of a more realistic look, but I like to still give credit where credit is due when it comes to a game's personalized look. So I ended up choosing a good mix of different games here. Metro 2033 for its okay, I'll be right back. I'm gonna get Mr. Grumpy Pants a thing or two. Oh my god. You're Mr. Grumpy Pants. You're Mr. Grumpy Pants. He strikes again, ladies and gentlemen. He strikes again. The stream has yet again been interrupted by a kitty cat. You're such a butt, aren't you? You're such a kitty, aren't you? Yeah, don't mind him. He just wants attention. I think you guys can hear him purr, right? Yeah, he's definitely purring. He's just happy that he's got his attention. He's got the attention of the camera. You like it, don't you? I love you, kid. I love you. Yeah, you go on the bed, okay? You can go on the bed. Just please don't be annoying, okay? That's all I ask. That's all I ask. So I love him. But anyway, oh no, I think he wants to go on me. Oh no, do you want to go on me? Do you want to go on my lap? I'm keeping this on the VOD, by the way, because it's cute. What? Come on. There you go. Don't be shy. Don't be shy. You've done this like 20 times to me already. There you go. There you go. There you go. Okay, don't drill that right there. There you go. There. Okay, you guys can't see him, but he's on my lap. So I'm just hoping he does not decide to, like, you know, get on the table, please. But anyways, so okay, what was I talking about? Oh yeah, Metro 2033 or Metro 2033. Excuse my language. So this is a post-apocalyptic shooter game, of course, as I already mentioned. It's more Russian themed as opposed to like 50s Americana. Actually, funny enough, the game takes place like in an altered like mid 20, like it alters from like the mid 2010s as opposed to the 20th century, which at least for me personally I much prefer. So it feels way more akin to like an altered modern era. So because of that, I'm fine with the setting. So, and yeah, it has some really cool like you know, Cold War and World War II inspired imagery combined into that, and I think it looks really cool for its thing. So, and then of course we got Limbo, which I mean it should be pretty obvious with that picture. It has that very shadow looking you know, 2D look that is actually very creepy at parts. Like, oh my god, like this game was very creepy whenever I played it. So I would definitely say that, like, as far as you know, I guess you can call it a horror game, it's one of the more interesting ones. And then we got Lara Croft and the Temple of Light, because it's a bit more, you know, on the isometric sort of field of view. I know I've been giving that game a lot of praise, but I do genuinely think that like people should check it out for you, like for yourself. But as far as the games that are a bit more on the isometric side and are a bit more have a slightly more exaggerated look, I would definitely recommend it. Amnesia, that goes without saying. The gothic Victorian horror look of the game is pretty iconic even to this day. Like, everyone knows what, like, if you look at a screenshot from Amnesia, you know exactly that it is from Amnesia. So it's just that iconic. Civ 5 for its more cartoony look in game, not taking itself super realistically at all, more exaggerated. Not as like cartoony as Civ 6, but you know, it's noticeable enough. And of course, Epic Mickey with its sort of, you know, twisted, you know, fairy tale mixed with like dark fantasy look that honestly looks pretty cool, at least in my opinion. So that's where those choices come from. But of course, there can only be one winner. As always, it should be pretty obvious as to what's gonna like, you know, probably win, but you know, you can always guess because I like it when you guys guess. Yeah, I'm gonna make sure he doesn't, like, you know, cry at the door. So here we go. So the award for the game with the best art direction goes to Amnesia: The Dark Descent. I had to give this game at least some sort of a, you know, praise since I haven't even done it yet. But this game does deserve the praise. The gothic Victorian like horror aesthetic really does work in this game's favor, especially since, like, funny enough, a lot of horror games don't really go for that look. They go for like more grimy, more dingy looking game, which this game does have that as well, but like I guess in a more modern context rather than, like, you know, old spooky haunted house look, because that's what Amnesia goes for the most part, and it works, especially with the the insanity meter that they have in the game with whenever you're like out of the light. It helps with those, like, you know, warped dingy like perspectives, and the atmosphere is pretty goddamn creepy, as well as the enemies themselves. And, well, truth be told, this is one of the best horror games of all time, hands down. And as far as, like, you know, influential horror games, this is up there as far as that's concerned, because this is the, whether you want to admit it or not, probably the most influential indie horror game ever made. No contest. Even FNAF has to thank this game for its existence, for showcasing that the indie scene can create quality horror games. Unfortunately, it did go down the fucking drain in the past 13 years. So, unfortunately, that sort of potential was wasted. But you cannot deny that Amnesia set the bar pretty goddamn high for horror games moving forward. And also, you know, a lot of horror games up until this point, there weren't really too many first-person horror games. The only other first-person horror game I can think of was like the Condemned games. But like every other horror game I can think of, they were all third-person. This game emphasized the first-person perspective and used it to its advantage. So that's at least worth something. So, all right. Next category. Best narrative. The best storyline of a game. Funny enough, you will actually be surprised with what games I'm actually going to choose for this. Because, well, there's going to be some games that are just straight up shooters on here. For this particular category, at least. But what are the games? So, I feel like it goes without saying with most of these. Like, you know, Mass Effect 2 makes sense because of the branching dialogue paths and just the, you know, what Corporal Shepard has to go through with their crew, and just, you know, adding more depth to a lot of the characters that were in that game. Alan Wake, because of just the trippy horror sections that were in that game as well. You know, sort of trying to unravel the mysteries of, you know, this rural town in the middle of Washington State, kind of away from everything, but has these really weird, you know, paranormal phenomenons going around. Red Dead Redemption, of course, with you playing as basically a bit of an anti-hero, going after your original, friends, essentially, and, trying to, save, like, some other people that are close to you because of some complicated, stuff. Obviously, I'm putting these lightly so that I don't spoil these for you guys, but you get the point. And then with Amnesia, basically just, you kind of trying to relearn about who you are as you're going through these dingy environments, and you trying to escape this, wretched place. And Halo Reach with, its prequel storyline following, this particular group of Spartans as they have to, send out a device to UNSC command so that it doesn't get to Covenant hands. And of course, explaining the fall of Reach. I also have Black Ops 1 on here, which you might typically laugh, and I don't feel comfortable putting Black Ops, like Call of Duty games, in best narrative. This is the exception, though, mostly because of just, obviously the game is presented mostly in flashbacks, and you okay? You good? Sorry, he's just breathing kind of heavily. I guess he's just being weird. If he throws up, I've got this. But anyways, but yeah, as far as like Call of Duty games are concerned, this is one of the few games I do feel like not only has multiple sections that do break up the monotony of shooting in a very, good way. Like, they have a few stealth sections in the game. There's a lot more just kind of like, talking and walking around with your, crew. But even just kind of unraveling the mystery of a lot of the characters that are in the game itself, and just kind of, dealing with the threat of a rogue Soviet operative. Like, it's actually set up in a way that is more compelling than any other campaign in Call of Duty's history, hands down. And because of that, like, okay, he's starting to cry. And because of that, I have to at least give a nod to this game for writing a compelling story that could work in any other, like, context. So that's what I will give praise for Black Ops 1 story. So, okay. I'll help you once I'm done with the list. So, he's a Mr. Grumpy Pants. God, so don't worry. But you get the point. I do think that all of these games have pretty worthy narrative moments that should at least be given enough praise. But of course, there can only be one winner. And, well, it's getting pretty close to the end, so there's only very few games in which, could actually be, game of the year. But of course, we'll get to that later. So, the best games, like the award for the best narrative of 2010 goes to Red Dead Redemption 1. Yeah. Red Dead Redemption 1 won the best narrative. Which makes sense, because, this game got a lot of praise whenever it first came out back in 2010. Mostly because of, the character of John Marston being the main protagonist of the game. And basically him feeling a lot of the conflictions of, going after a lot of his former... Jesus Christ. I really hope my cousin fucking deals with him. I'm sorry, that's actually getting annoying. Anyways, John Marston is pretty compelling, especially considering that, like, he's going after basically his former colleagues in his original gang. And so to kind of, have that sort of conflict of interest is very compelling in its own right. And it also helps that there's a lot of memorable characters that get brought up, and even a lot of like side missions that kind of add to the depth of Marston and the other crew or former crew from the original gang. Which obviously a lot of this does get a lot more context with Red Dead Redemption 2, as that game is a prequel. Helps flesh out this game a bit more. And this game also showed, and this is one thing I will give like credit where credit is due as well. This game showed that Wild West games can still have compelling narratives in like, you know, more recent times, cuz you know, the western genre was mostly like a product of like, you know, the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, like the mid 20th century. And well, there hasn't really been like that one like standout, you know, Wild West story since like the early 70s. So to have a video game showcase that, yeah, no, this setting can still have compelling narratives, even if it's a bit more of an alternate timeline, because, you know, states that are in the game don't technically exist. Well, none of the states do, but whatever. It adds a lot of, you know, it showcases that, like, you know, the West can still be used as, like, a narrative piece. And that's pretty cool. And, of course, even though we didn't nominate Undead Nightmare, I will give that a bit of an honorable nod. So, there you go, guys. Now we've reached the final award of the night. The Game of the Year. So, did the actual Game Awards choose the best games to represent 2010? Actually, yes. They had some really good choices here. It goes without saying for pretty much most of them, like, you know, or really just all of them, Mass Effect 2 being, you know, an amazing RPG that was able to stand out on its own. God of War 3, which I know hasn't had a lot of awards be brought up, I will bring it up as being a really solid hack and slash and just an amazing, just general action adventure in its own right. Red Dead Redemption, of course, being a pretty phenomenal, you know, Wild West story and narrative, as we already mentioned, and of course Halo Reach being, you know, a compelling prequel to an already legendary series of sci-fi shooters, and of course Call of Duty Black Ops being a loose sequel to World at War while being able to stand on its own and just having overall just solid on the nose board, like it's pretty much just solid overall gameplay. So that being said, it should not surprise you that Red Dead Redemption was the game that did end up winning the initial Game Awards, which, fair, I will give where credit is due. Because, just like with the the multiplayer category, I'm not gonna remove one of these games. I'm only gonna add one more. Civilization 5. This game deserves to get the nod, especially when it comes to a year that was so bad, or at least so mediocre, when it came to like the strategy genre as a whole, that I just personally have to give this game the nod. Like, I just had to at least, you know, give this game personally a bit of like the word. Like, you know what I mean? So as far as I'm concerned, yeah, no, like Civ 5 deserves to be on the same row as every single one of these games. So, and again, that does showcase that, like, yeah, no, 2010 was a really damn good year. It was hard to fuck up for the Game Awards as far as, like, you know, choosing the wrong game. Because, truth be told, even if, like, you know, the Game Awards was kind of cringy back then, I will give credit where credit is due, and they ended up choosing really good, you know, games as far as what, you know, Game of the Years would have been. But, of course, it's the last award of the night. There's only one last award to give out. And if you guys have seen a bit of a pattern, you guys probably know what's going to win. It may upset some people, but of course, we're going to go through it anyways. So here we go. The final award of the night. And the winner of the Game of the Year of the Caspian Award of the Game of the Year of 2010 of the Caspian Awards goes to I'm hesitant to say this because I know this is probably going to be my most controversial one. No, I'd say 2014's was probably more controversial, but this is probably going to be second most controversial. Call of Duty Black Ops. Yeah, I knew there were going to be people who were going to be very contentious with this. Because, well, this did not win Best Shooter. Halo Reach did. But... and usually I am very hesitant when it comes to nominating a Call of Duty game for Game of the Year. Because, well, truth be told, there are way too many Call of Duty games that exist. About half the games should just straight up not exist at all. And unfortunately, especially in recent years, this franchise has unfortunately become a bit of a joke. However, I could still make a solid case that Call of Duty Black Ops 1 not only stand on its own as a singular title, but also is a good enough game to be nominated for Game of the Year and even win it. So first of all, this game had the best campaign in all of Call of Duty, at least in my opinion. What other game has a better campaign than Black Ops 1? Tell me. Like, Call of Duty 4? There's not really a lot of character depth in that one. Modern Warfare 2? That campaign is overrated. And I still stand by that. So, like, you know, there's the hate. You guys know it's true. But, whatever. World at War? Has a really solid, Russia campaign. America campaign has a lot left to be desired. Black Ops 2, while the branching paths are very commendable, unfortunately, the game's campaign hasn't particularly aged the greatest. It's better than a lot of other games, but that's not saying much. And, well, any game from, between Ghosts and Black Ops 4 are inapplicable, except for maybe Infinite Warfare, which even then, main villain's kind of lame, and, there's some story consistency issues. Modern Warfare 2019, you can make a good case for that one as well. Cold War as well. But I do generally think that Black Ops 1 does have the best Call of Duty campaign. Because, it's a perfect length for a single player, game that's more known for multiplayer, by this point especially. And I do think that, it tells a compelling narrative that honestly doesn't even have to be linked to the entire franchise. You can pretty much play this, campaign without any context for World at War or the future games, or even any other Call of Duty game, and you can still enjoy it. And, well, not only does this have the best campaign, it also has the best multiplayer in the franchise. It's better than Call of Duty 4's because it has a bit more customization and, basically improved a lot of the stuff from that game. It's better than Modern Warfare 2 because the weapon balancing is way better in this game and the kill streaks are not nearly as annoying and you don't have a nuke that ends the game even if your team is winning. So if, enemy team player gets a nuke on their team, you guys lose, which is fucking stupid. You get the point, is that, it has the best campaign, has best multiplayer, and even though it's not my favorite zombies, I do think that it is a solid zombies mode. obviously, even just considering Kino and 5 and Dead Ops, which of course we'll get to Dead Ops in a second, 5 and Kino are still solid entry level maps. If you want to get, familiar with zombies, Kino is definitely a good intro map. And then 5 for those who want a bit more of a challenge and want to differentiate from the World War II Nazi theater. And then of course that leads us into the game's presentation. It's really solid. The main menu alone is the most unique menu in any game because you can literally walk outside of the main menu in that little room. No other game that I can think of has a dynamic menu than this game does. It's insane. And even just that sort of Cold War look, it's very unique because most games, there's very, very, very few games I can think of that use the actual Cold War as a motif. But not Americana Cold War, but Cold War conflicts. Obviously, any game that takes place in Vietnam, so Bad Company 2's Vietnam expansion, Battlefield Vietnam itself, Rising Storm 2, and I guess the Far Cry 5 DLC. And then of course Metal Gear Solids 3 and 5. Those games take place in the Cold War as well. But other than those, that's really not a lot of games in comparison to the countless World War II games or the countless modern military games or even the many military shooters that take place in the future or the near future. So having it placed in the Cold War was a perfect decision for this. So, and of course there's tons of bonus features like Dead Ops Arcade, which I personally prefer Dead Ops 1 over Dead Ops 2 and 3. And again, like I said, this game, if it didn't have Call of Duty on the name of it at all, people would still call this game a goated game, even to this day. I still believe that. So yeah, and of course, well, last but not least, it's not bullet point on here, but this game, of course, is pretty tied to the channel history. I play Call of Duty Black Ops a lot on this channel, so admittedly, there is a little bit of a bias, but this is, at least in my opinion, one of the best. It's the best Call of Duty game by a mile. It's not I mean, there's some that do get close, but I do definitively think this is the best in the franchise. And I would even argue that this game is one of the best shooter games ever made. I don't know if I would say the best, because there's a lot of games that would be huge contenders, including Halo Reach. But as far as other games in the genre, this game exemplifies it. So in hindsight, Black Ops 1 I do think is a genuinely really solid game, even if the franchise itself is pretty mediocre overall. So, and that's coming from someone who does like Call of Duty games. But of course, let's recap, because, well, not a single game got multiple awards, which, as you guys know, that is a pretty damn good sign for any year. Of course, Action Adventure went to Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. Best Platform Game went to Shantae Risk is Revenge. Best RPG went to Mass Effect 2. Best Shooter Game went to Halo Reach. Best Sim Strategy went to Civ 5. Best Racing Game went to Need for Speed Hot Pursuit. Best Multiplayer went to Bad Company 2. Best DLC went to Dragon Age Awakening. Best Art Direction went to Amnesia The Dark Descent. Best Narrative went to Red Dead Redemption. And of course, the Game of the Year went to Call of Duty Black Ops 1. So, as far as my personal favorites as a bonus round, we've got Black Ops 1, Halo Reach, Bad Company 2, Limbo, Shantae's Risk is Revenge, Red Dead Redemption, Amnesia The Dark Descent, Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, Sid Meier's Civilization 5, and Just Cause 2. I think that game's underrated as hell. So, those are my top 10 favorites of the year. And then, of course, let's not forget about all the other amazing games that came out in 2010. And as you see, this isn't just a game, like, this isn't just a, me just talking about, like, guilty pleasures. I would also consider many of the games on here to be just straight up honorable mentions this time around. some of them are still guilty pleasures because of just, public perception. But I do consider all the games that you're about to see to be pretty good in their own right. So, okay, there's one more game that I just, remembered was also a pretty underrated gem, though. Let me switch over to my face cam just to make sure that, like, I'm not accidentally doing anything stupid. Okay. Sorry, I forgot about one more game that I do want to add. Although, to be fair, there's a lot of games on here. So, okay, I'll just take that one and I'll just put it right there. All right. There we go. Yes, I used the Steam Grid database, by the way, for all these pictures. This one's going to be covered a little bit, but it's Tom Clancy's Hawks, so. But anyways, so I mean, just look. This is the most games we've had in this segment, by the way. So, and again, admittedly, some of these are a bit more guilty pleasures. I'd say Aliens vs. Predator 2010, Star Wars The Force Awakens 2, Army of Two 40th Day, Guitar Hero Warriors of Rock, and Tom Clancy's Hawks 2. Those are a bit more guilty pleasures of mine, but I personally still think that they're pretty fun in their own right. But as far as the other games, Darksiders, Lost Planet 2, Castlevania Lords of Shadow, Prince of Persia: The Forgotten Sands, Rock Band 3, Mafia 2, Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker, and Dante's Inferno. You can already see why the action-adventure category got a lot of snubs. So that's why I'm here to at least give them the credit, because again, this was the year of the hack and slash. So, yeah, and I was so close to putting Hawks 2 in the sim strategy, but not a lot of people liked the game, unfortunately, which made me upset. But, it is what it is. But you get the point. This is why I do consider 2010 to be the best game that we talked about, the best year we talked about so far. Because, even the games we didn't that didn't even get into the list, this is pretty insane. So yeah, suffice to say, and again, even if you don't agree with all the games here, there's some that you're iffy with, you cannot deny just how damn much of an impact 2010 had. And it honestly is pretty sad that we haven't had another year since. It's been 14 years. And I don't know, maybe I'm just a bit biased because I'm much more of a fan of 2000s gaming. And while technically this isn't the 2000s, this is the first year of the 2010s, obviously. I still kind of miss this era of just, being able to play fully fledged games without having to pay a bunch for DLC. So that's at least where I come from when it comes to all the games you see here. So, but of course, that's gonna be it for tonight's Game Awards. We are done with the 2010s. Check in for next weekend as we start to go into the 2000s, starting with 2009, which was, admittedly, it's going to be a bit more cooler, at least for 2009 and 2008, but rest assured, it's going to be pretty awesome. So I hope you guys did enjoy this stream. If you guys did, make sure to hit that follow button down below and turn on the bell icons that you'll be notified exactly when I'll be streaming. While you guys are at it, make sure to check out links down below as well, specifically the Discord, SoundCloud affiliation link. If you guys are watching this on YouTube, make sure to hit that subscribe button. And if you're watching this on Twitch, and if you guys can, hit the subscribe button over there. If you can't necessarily do that, that is completely fine. I'm just glad that you guys took time to watch this. But regardless of all that, though, make sure to share the stream to other people as well, and continue to be awesome people in the process. Until then, I'll see you guys later. My cat's crying like a storm, so I'm going to take care of him right now. So until then, peace out. Have a good night, guys. Bye.